Hello everybody and welcome to the 62nd Omloop Het Volk, or the circuit of Het Volk. It's a race which is based in Ghent but it finishes in Lokeren, and it first began back in 1945. It does of course open the Belgian cycling season 2007. I'm Phil Liggett, joined in the commentary box by Paul Sherwin. Here's a quick look at some of the recent winners. Pieter Van Petegem having a couple of wins back in 97-98. Riding out his final year this year, by the way, he's on a new team, Paul. He's joined Quickstep. I don't think Lotto were too happy with that.
Well, I don't think Lotto were too happy about renewing his contract either, which is why I think very cleverly Quickstep brought him on board. This is the finish line in Lokeren, quite a way away from the start in Ghent. But I have to tell you one thing, on the start line this morning in Ghent, Phil, it was very wet indeed.
Well, take us round the route, a race you know pretty well because you did ride it.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable race because in the early part of the year, the riders go over the climbs very early on. The first climb of the day is the Klausberg. They go over the Old Quaremont, which is a very important race. Halfway into the race, they go over the Muur de Grammont. The last climb of the day is the Molenberg before they head back up towards the finish in Lokeren after going through the small town of Wetteren. A difficult race, 200 kilometers that the riders face.
Alright, well, when we join the action, we'll be between the Valkenberg and the Eichenberg with the four big crucial climbs just before the finish. But let's go to the start earlier today. Many of the riders coming in from the Tour of California, they're going to notice a slight difference in the weather here. It's very cold, very wet, and I have to say they're a little slow coming out of the cars to play today because they're not very keen on the weather at all. But once again, Paul, in Belgium, a massive crowd here in St. Peter's Plain.
New Jersey for Stefan Weissenhoff he's riding for now, and they've changed their colours to the slightly darker green. And here is a big man for the Belgian Classics, Juan Antonio Fletcher.
Yes, a man he's Spanish, but he does ride well in these classics, that's for sure. As the riders now continue to have a few proud moments. This rider here, and I think it's Capel, the former champion of Belgium, signing autographs, looking quite content. He too will be ending his career pretty soon. And here's Nick Noyens, the man who's won this race in the past.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is the new St. Peter's Plain, the St. Peter's Square, right in the very heart of Ghent. They're very proud about this renovation. That's Nico Martin just riding up there to sign in. If you want to find this town square, Phil, by the way, it's not very far away from the old Sports Palace, but they are very proud of the renovation they've done here. And I think we get a glance here at Max van Heeswijk. Everybody today very much wrapped up against the cold. And here's the French-speaking Belgian, and that, of course, is Philippe Gilbert, last year's winner.
Well, all the riders here, all keen, whatever the weather, of course. For the Belgians, it's very, very typical weather. They know it well. They know what to expect. They know out on course, it's every man for himself. There's just under 195 riders on the start line of 25 teams. All smiles there for former champion of Holland, Servaes Knaven. And this looks like it's Jimmy Casper, the sprinter from France.
Big change for him too, because he's moved across from Team Cofidis to Team Unibet, and that storm is still going on as to whether or not they're actually going to ride in the Pro Tour events later on in the year. That was Leon van Bon, a new team for him as well, returning back to the home of Rabobank.
The Pro Tour itself entering its third year this year, and I defy anybody to tell me who won the last two, but we'll find out if it gains any popularity this year out. Well, almost set to go. It's very, very typical Belgian weather, this. A great public, they'll support whatever the weather. Don't forget, this is a race in the past which has been cancelled because of snow. There's no chance of that today, that's for sure. Nico Eekhout, who is a Belgian champion this year, gets the chance to fly the colours. And the riders here now all pretty much ready to go.
I'll tell you one thing, Phil, what amazes me is even despite these atrocious weather conditions at the start, there's an incredible crowd turned up to see these guys ride away.
Well, happy days as the atmosphere now is building and the riders all more or less ready to go to face up to the day in the saddle. There'll be an early break, there always is, but they might survive. This is a good distance at this time of the year. It's just 200 kilometres. Time of day, by the way, is just after 11 o'clock, and so it's warming up a little bit. Finishes always to be time between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's made for television.
Well, the riders from Discovery without George Hincapie, recently injured in the Tour of California, so I would think they're a little bit light. They'll have to count on Stijn de Volder, of course, one of their top riders, and of course Vladimir Gusev, who a lot of people think is going to be the top man for the future. This man is the man you spoke about earlier, Phil. This is Pieter Van Petegem. He loves this race. He knows nearly all of the course today because, of course, his hometown of Brakel is pretty much on the race route.
He's a man for the spring classics. You don't hear much about Pieter Van Petegem at the end of the year because his riding's all done at this time of the year.
Robbie Mchugh just signing in, hard to recognise him there, bundled up against the cold. He's just returned to warmer climes, and of course everybody knows this man, the rainbow bands on his shoulders there. That is Tom Boonen, and he's a man I think, Phil, they all want to win today.
Well, he's already got great form from his fine riding before he's come into Belgium, but I noticed a change in the weather here from the heat of Asia and the Arab nations. Last year's winner, by the way, we've just seen Philippe Gilbert. He won at an average speed of nearly 41 kilometres an hour. That's about 25.5. That's not bad, and I reckon that we can expect similar speeds today. There's a strong wind blowing, but it is a bitterly cold wind. Happy days. Here's the bell. It's not for the last lap, but it could be. It's one big lap. And as we pick up the action out on the course now, I can tell you 8 riders got clear very early on, and they're being chased down by the peloton. We're over the top of the Muur, but we've got the Eichenberg just around the corner. Quick listing of the names: Johan van Summeren, Predictor Lotto, Gert Stegmans, Quick Step, Sebastian Rossler, a Quick Step as well, Sebastian Minor from Cofidis, Geoffroy Lecat from Cofidis, Lorenzo Benucci, T-Mobile, Manuel Quinziato from Leaky Gas, and Jeremy Hunt of Unibet.com. They're the breakaway, and now, Paul, this is where the action starts. 94 kilometres to go.
This is Frédéric Guédon on the front there in the white jersey of the Française des Jeux. You can see just over to the right-hand side, Unibet. Baden Cook will be a man looking to try and get himself a fine performance here, and there is the Belgian national champion, Nico Eekhout. You see how the riders switch from left to right here? Well, the Eichenberg, where the riders are right now, has got nice little bits of tarmac at the side of the road. It's just that little bit smoother. It's 1,200 metres long, the Eichenberg, and it's one of those climbs, Phil, that gets very steep up towards the top.
Well, this is the 7th of the 10 climbs now, and this is where they'll start to try and wind down this breakaway. It's been away a long time. There's some of the names for you, and the gap is now down to just 59 seconds here as we approach the Eichenberg. Nice to see Jeremy Hunt getting in a move. He really deserves a big win, Jeremy. He's always in the places in Belgium, particularly. He rides very well in Belgium, riding for Unibet.com, which, by the way, is a team registered in Sweden.
Well, Jeremy gave them their first victory of the year, and that was down in France in the season opener, and he's in very fine form. He was so close to pulling off a big win last year, but I think it won't be too long this season before he gets a win. And when you consider, Phil, the weather conditions, just look at the people who are turning out for this race. We're right in the very early part of the season, but for the Belgians, this race here, Het Volk, it really opens up their sporting season as far as they're concerned.
Well, wise men these, Paul, keeping over to the left, a little bit of smoother road here. Massive crowd turning out because conditions really are not for spectators at all today. And here comes the drive from the back now, trying to close down this gap. Nico Eekhout is the rider with the black top to his jersey. A little bit of bike skills required to jump over the cobblestones, snatch a little bit of smooth riding, even if it's only for about 6 feet, and then back onto the cobbles. And Cook doing a good ride here. Is it Cook?
Well, I'm a bit surprised really to see Unibet riding on the front like this, because they've got Jeremy Hunt in that leading breakaway. Just a little bit further down, you can see they are actually starting to get a split off the front end of this group, and Nico Eekhout has got himself into the move. But you can see these riders, Phil, they are very nervous indeed. That's Philippe Gilbert over on the left-hand side there, trying to accelerate. He wants to consolidate here and try and get himself clear. They've actually taken a few seconds off the lead, and there's an accident at the back from a rider from Bouygues Telecom who's gone down pretty hard.
Well, the road surface is pretty slippery actually, because the rain is still around, and these cobblestones are absolutely treacherous, and that's a wide swing there for Gilbert. He's trying to get a little group working here with just 3 more climbs to come. And 51 seconds the gap. They would like to change matters here just a little bit.
Well, that's a nice move, because Tom Boonen was in that move as well, so obviously he is being very attentive indeed. But you can see what sort of damage the Eichenberg, Phil, is doing at the back. It's a very difficult climb, as we said, 1.2 kilometers in length. But look at the time gap. That leading group of 8 riders a few moments ago were well over 1.5 minutes clear. Now they're just 49 seconds in front.
Angelo Furlan, the Italian on the Crédit Agricole team, last around the corner here of this little group just at the moment, and the Française des Jeux rider is Cyril Monoret just ahead of him. Meanwhile, this is life up front here, and Johan van Summeren. You see the Lotto team, they were De Vitamin Lotto last year, slightly changed the colours. It's a pinkish hue now. And by the way, Predictor is a pregnancy test kit, and if you speak to Robbie Mchugh about that, he'll always have a good answer for you as to why a man needs to worry about getting pregnant.
Well, he needs to worry about predicting it, and maybe Robbie Mchugh would like to predict whether or not he's going to win the race here this afternoon. I think again, Phil, Robbie getting a little bit long in the tooth in his older years, and he doesn't really like these weather conditions. I think he's basically trying to get himself ready to ride well in the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France, which seems to be his recipe for success these days.
Last man the breakaway so far, T-Mobile's Lorenzo Bonucci sitting at the back here. This breakaway getting away very early on today and consolidating quite a lead at one point. They're hovering now at this 45 seconds and trying to just keep themselves ahead of the field. 43 there is Alan Johansson, the champion of Denmark, and he's got a flat tyre, poor man.
Yeah. And I tell you what, if you get a flat tyre at the wrong time, Phil, you're going to have a long wait to see whether the team car is going to come forward. You've seen there's a bit of chaos though after the Eichenberg, so his team car could very well be 1 or 2 minutes behind, and he's going to have a hard time getting a wheel change first of all, then getting himself back into the race. Here we're on the Wolverberg. It's not actually a climb in itself, but it's a very long section of cobblestones, and you can see the second group, which has got clear, in fact is about 44 seconds behind, and that's the group that contains Tom Boonen.
Well, these are the 8 riders, and another problem coming their way again now. This is Wim van Sevenen. That's bad luck for him. He's one of the workhorses. Whoa, look at him jam up his wheel there. And you've got some idea just how slippery these road surfaces still are. He needs a quick change here because this is a pressure point of the race. The gap is closing down. There's a chase group of 44. The main peloton where he's just punctured from 57. There's how you bunny hop the old pavement as well.
Well, I'll give you that was a very quick change by the mechanic there. I timed that at 13 seconds for a back wheel. Not bad at all. But the important thing to remember is, Phil, it's the rider who must never panic in a situation like that, because if he panics, that panic goes straight through to the mechanic as well, and he then starts to make errors. A little bit of a chase here. That's Jimmy Casper there in second place, and right in front of him Stefan Weissermann in his brand new colours of Team Wiesenhof.
Yes, Steph looking pretty good there, and Casper also having a little resurgence of life here with Unibet.com. Used to ride for Cofidis, showing a little bit of his North of France bike skills there as he comes onto the side of the road. Everybody feeling now that this is where the race is going to make its final shape. You've got that sense of feeling. These are the flatlands of this Flanders area, and boy, this is hard work, especially with the wind blowing today and it's quite cold.
Well, that group with Tom Boonen in fact has been pulled back into the main field because that 42-second time gap is back, of course, to Stefan Weissermann and Jimmy Casper. The main field, though, Phil, within a minute now of that leading group of 8 riders, and Casper, I think here, just prolonging the agony a fraction, because I'm fairly sure that these guys are going to get pulled back pretty quickly.
Well, made his big name when he won a stage of the Tour de France at last, many would say, in 2005, and put himself on the board. He won the Grand Prix de Nain last year, and also the Tour of Picardy, another good race up in the northern part of France.
Well, as you look there, you can see the almost the whole of the main field now charging up to those 2 riders. A minute up to the leading group of 8, who I think now will start to consolidate that lead if they can, because there's not really very many riders on the front decided to chase, and Team Quickstep certainly aren't going to chase, Phil, because they've got 2 men in this leading group, and I think with Gerrit Stegemans being there, I think they'll be very happy with this.
Sebastian Minnaert is the Cofidis rider, sat at the back of the breakaway at the moment. Johan van Summeren, number 15, just ahead of him. This is the breakaway. Sebastian Rosslaar, a quick step. He's got a teammate up here as well in Geert Stegmans. Good hard-working group. They're all probably saying to themselves, it's great to be back in the racing season again, albeit we've just started the month of March here, and there's still a long way to go at 90 kilometres. Only three climbs, I think it is, left now, and the gap is at 45 seconds. It's not enough.
Well, yeah, the last climb of the day, in fact, is the Molenberg, and it will be a big advantage for these riders to get to the Molenberg still in the lead, because once you get to the Molenberg, it'll be absolute chaos in the main field. The Molenberg is a very famous climb used in many of these classics, and the difficult thing about the Molenberg is you have to battle for the right-hand turn off a massive, big, wide road, and then all of a sudden, once you make that right-hand turn, you're in a road that's only just wide enough for a car, and everybody's battling to get into that corner in the first 5 places.
Waiting for the riders to pop out of the trees here. Now, normally if you live in Belgium, cyclists have to stick to the cycle paths unless there aren't any. Then of course you can use the road, but that's the law. And this is the chasing group of 2, still trying to reach And at 45 seconds, they are pulling away very slightly from the peloton. Just 20 seconds the gap now. It really is nothing as they try to work their way forward. I think it's a bit of a forlorn hope, this one. They're providing the carrot, I think, for the peloton to try and leapfrog up to the leaders. Inside 90 kilometres now. Steegman's the man on form up front, by the way. He's just come back from the Tour of the Algarve in Portugal, where he won the first stage there. But I bet the weather was a bit warmer than it is here today in Belgium.
Just looking down here, Phil, at the peloton, I think they've actually turned off, because you can see them all across the road here right now. I don't think they're too worried about the leading group of 8 riders, because they realise that once we go over the Molenberg, there's an awful long way to get to the finish line. In fact, the Molenberg is at around about 65 kilometres to go to the line, and I think anybody thinking about overall victory knows that they can actually organise themselves and chase that group down. But what it has done here, in fact, has increased the advantage of that leading breakaway to 1 minute and 5 seconds.
Well, it's had a very good entry, Het Volk, this year, with all the Italian teams also sending riders. The Italians that used to shun Belgium because they hate the weather, they hate the roads, they hate the food, and they like the lifestyle in their own country. But these days, they know where they can earn a big reputation. It's by winning the early classics in Belgium. So the Italians are here in force today, as we now look at what is the peloton, led fittingly enough, I think, Paul, by the national champion Nico Ikut in his black top jersey there, enjoying it. He's a rider who's won a lot of races in his career, but he lacks the big results. He was rather like a Juan of Belgium, really.
Well, I have to say that his reputation, really, and it's in no way derogatory, is a rider of kermesses, and that's where he gets a lot of his big wins. But he certainly got his biggest ever win when he won that title last year. And I have to say, Phil, he is wearing that jersey with pride. He always shows it off at the front end of the main field, and despite being on one of the smaller teams, he does come up with a lot of good wins.
He does, and he likes this race. It's a good starter because he seems to like racing in Belgium particularly. He finished 4th in this event 2 years ago, and I make it a total of around 65, 66 victories to his name. So he's had a good career. He's been a pro an awful long time, because now he's hit 36 years of age, I'm afraid, just at the end of last year.
That climb that the riders just came out of, by the way, just a little bit further down the road, is the same climb they came out of just a little while ago, the Eichenberg. And just on the top of that climb, there's a very well-known brewery that if you actually stop when you're out training and move into the brewery, they'll give you a sample.
Oh, well, don't tell a cyclist that. He might never come out again and continue with the race. There's the long line, pressure on. They've got this breakaway just about under control at the moment. 1 minute and a quarter now. We've still got the 2 riders in between, Besserman and Casper, and 88 kilometres covered for the riders in the race today. Total distance of 200. It was 202 last year, very slightly different length, and won by Philippe Gilbert, the French-speaking Belgium, who rides on a French team, and we so often think about him as being a Frenchman, which of course he most certainly is not. Very much a Belgian cyclist from the Walloon area here, down by the Ardennes. Haaghoek, 2.3 metres of cobblestones here. We might see this again this year in the Tour of Flanders.
Long, difficult section of cobblestones, because you see the riders drop down a fraction before starting to move up, and in the early part of the year these cobbles are very treacherous. Fortunately, the early morning rain seems to have dissipated and the cobbles are reasonably dry, but that doesn't mean there might be some slippy patches out on the course. Just sitting on the back there, you can see Steegmans. I think Team Quickstep will be very happy with the combination here, but of course they really would like their man Tom Boonen to come up with the win, because after all he dominated the big classics last year with his wins in, of course, the Tour of Flanders, and almost coming up with the win as well in Paris-Roubaix. If it hadn't been for that strange little stopping at the railway crossing on the run in towards the finish line, maybe he'd have come back to Fabian Cancellara, but that's an answer I don't think we'll ever know.
No, absolutely not, but he's made his traditional start, shall we say, to the season, absolutely eclipsing the riders in the Tour of Qatar. He didn't win the race this time, he finished 2nd, but he snatched 4 stages, stages 2, 3, 4 and 6, so they must have wondered what they can do. But that race is a peculiar race, high winds, lots of sand, basically pancake flat, suits the sprinter, although not all of the races were group sprints. You have to work pretty hard to hold your position to win the race. Tom, absolutely a very strong rider indeed.
Yeah, but I think the important thing for Team Quickstep in the Tour of Qatar was they completely and utterly dominated the race. Yes. They finished 1st, 2nd and 3rd overall, and Tom was quite happy to see his own teammate take the victory, despite the fact that they wanted to win every individual stage. They lost out on one day.
I don't suppose you can blame them for putting a little bit of money over the fence to the other teams. After all, it takes a lot of riders as they start the ride. And so the riders here going clear, and it looks now as though this breakaway is 1 minute 30 clear now as they continue. 86 kilometres to go. Great tempo riding being done. Nico Eekhout riding superbly on the front, tucked in just behind one rider here. The gap though opening up just a little bit, so they're going to have to make a decision sooner or later. Wonderful roads though, aren't they?
Oh, these are great racing roads if you're a rider like these men. And there's a problem there. Somebody, like I think that's Stefan Weisserman.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
And that's a neutral service car, and he's not getting a very fast change there at all. And you can see, if you just look over to the right there, how nasty the fields are, because it's been raining here almost consistently for the month of February. And this is a slow wheel change, Phil. That was at least 20-25 seconds.
Well, he's had it then, because the peloton,
and he hasn't got going yet.
No, something a problem. Well, the next problem will be the car in the way of the peloton, because they're going to be closing in now. They're about 25 seconds back, I would think. Here comes the camera pull. Wait for it. As the team car begins to move away, I think we're going to see the peloton coming into sight of Weisserman. Don't think he's a lot of choice now, really. He's going to have to probably go back into the field, and that'll mean curtains for Casper as well, left out on his own. Meanwhile, these are the leaders. Two riders and Quick-Step. We're in a Quick-Step sandwich right now, front and back, as we head onto the Leberg.
Leberg is a long climb at 1.1 kilometres. The steepest point is almost 14%, but at least it's a smooth surface road that these riders are going on. Kop van der Weekstraat, if you saw that sign there, is the front end of the race.
A lot of work being done. Looking at the breakaway here, no passengers at all at the moment. That's Jeremy Hunt here at the back. Former British champion on a couple of occasions actually, and he always rides well here in Belgium. Looks a little bit under pressure just now.
Just looking at that sign there, Phil, for the Kop van der Weekstraat, it reminds me of a funny story of a fellow commentator of ours a couple of years ago. Didn't quite understand the Flemish language the way we do, and he actually said, well, these riders at the moment are climbing this climb of the Kop van der Weekstraat.
He must have thought there were an awful lot of climbs by the same name.
I won't give him his name away.
No, don't do that. It would be unfair. It's probably Phil Liggett. Anyway, looking at the back of the riders here now, this is Sebastian Rosselaar. He's also under a bit of pressure. Stegman's his other teammate is riding well, and Johan van Summeren. This is a surprisingly good bike rider. He's a tall man, but he really can ride the bike. He doesn't seem ungainly at all. I'll
tell you something, a few moments ago when we were going over the summit of the Eichenberg climb, Phil, I thought these guys were going to get caught because the gap came down to around about 45 seconds, but it slowly tickled its way back up now, and very shortly I think we'll be looking at the 2-minute mark as we go around a very dicky little corner there. You can see the fields here will probably be like this for another couple of months until the weather does start to heat up in this part of the world. Jimmy Casper now on his own at 38 seconds, but the main field have certainly lost interest, I think, in chasing.
Well, they're still under the escort here. The champion of Belgium, Eekhout, just sitting on the centre there, just waiting for somebody to open up the racing here, I feel. It's they know that the race is far from decided. The breakaway though, look, it's up to 150 again now. It's easing itself out. We're not sure where Stefan Weisserman has got to now. Has he been picked up, or is he riding in no man's land? But it looks from the indication that Jimmy Casper is staying up there in the middle. We've obviously committed our cameras to the peloton and the breakaway, so we rely on the camera now in the helicopter to find anybody in between.
Well, Stein de Volder just over on the left hand side for Team Discovery Channel, and they too will be looking, of course all the Belgian riders on Team Discovery will be very motivated to try and do well in this race, but looking at Nico Eekhout on the front end of the main field, Phil, there is no chase right now, and I think those leading group of 8 are going to be given a fair amount of freedom. I don't think any chase will start to get organised until we've actually been over the Molenberg.
1:52, the 2-minute mark is a reality shortly, I think, because there's still no reaction here. The Belgian champion waiting for somebody to come past him, and then hopefully he'll take the wheel, I would guess. The riders in no hurry. They've got I think a second agenda here. I don't think they believe the breakaway's gone for the day, that's for sure. They're just blocking off the whole road. Nobody can progress through from the back. This is the art of racing in Belgium. You've got to fight for your position and hold it, and you just stay there because nobody can get through.
And you've also got to eat for your position too. You can just see De Volder on the left hand side there. It is so important in the early season races, Phil, to actually eat probably a little bit more than you have to in the latter races when the weather starts to warm up, because not only are you trying to eat here to produce energy, you're also eating here to keep your body warm as well, because we're looking at a temperature temperature of around about 5 degrees Celsius. You know, that's only just a little bit above freezing, which is why you can see most of these riders are pretty much wrapped up against the elements.
You can't blame them for that. Also against the falls too, because on these cobblestones, if you do slip off, you need a bit of padding around your body, especially on your fingers, because they're very nasty when you crash on the cobbles. You don't really slide, you just lock into them. 156, first time we've seen a slight reversal here. Stein de Volder, he's on his 4th season I think now, with under the direction of Johan Bruneel, and he's had half a dozen wins I think, or about that, to his credit. Elst is where we are now, minute 57 the gap, nobody in between, so obviously we didn't see it, but Casper has come back into the pack.
Well, they're slowing down again, and you can see they're bunching across the road, and I think the reason for that is they are all waiting, I think, for the big final climb, the big attack once they go up the Molenberg, and then we may well see the big names come forward like Pieter Van Petegem and of course Tom Boonen, although they must be in a bit of a quandary right now, Team Quickstep, because they've got 2 riders in that leading group, and the thing about Boonen is he's not a greedy rider. He's always happy to try and have one of his teammates win a race like this, because he knows that he will count on them when he goes later on in the season to races like the Tour of Flanders and of course Paris-Roubaix.
82 kilometres left, and we've gone over 2 minutes now. Well, there was a lot of concern and conjecture whether Filippo Pozzato started this race today. Nobody could find him for a while, but he is in the peloton, and the fact is he'll cop a fine today because he didn't go to the signing on office, and so he was officially a non-starter, but they've just rectified that fact. This is the breakaway. We're on Berendries now, and this is another little climb which will sort of search the early morning fitness in these legs, early season fitness rather, but Van Sommeren is the strong man here. He's just tapping it out.
That's Jez Hunt just over to the right hand side in the lime green shorts. There he is in 3rd position, former British national champion. I think really maturing in the latter part of his career, because we watched Jez Hunt many times racing in races like the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic in Australia, where he would come up with wins on a number of occasions, but he certainly has, I think, Phil, now established himself as a top European pro.
Climb number 9 of 10. They've got one more to come, but unfortunately, unlike some of the classics in the region, it's nowhere near the finish when they get over the top, so they've just got to keep on the concentration here, get these climbs behind them, and then see if they can build on this 2-minute lead. It'll be extraordinary if it goes the distance, because it went very early on, these 8 riders. They've all been working pretty well together, although I think we might be getting 1 or 2 passengers now. 1 or 2 of those faces are rather pained as they come up towards the top of the Berendries, leaving them just 81 kilometres to go, but the gap is opening just now. We'll see what the peloton do on this climb, because these roads are so narrow just here. There's a real opportunity to break clear.
There is the other rider that we're seeing in the lime green colours of Liquigas is Manuel Quinziato. He rose to fame last year in the Tour de France when he was in a long breakaway. I thought he was going to come up with the win because he was actually a very good sprinter, but unfortunately he got dislodged down towards the end. There's been a change in interest as the main field now comes through Mikkelbeck, because they are now, Phil, starting to stretch themselves out into a long line, and it'll be interesting to see just exactly which team is going to do the pacemaking at the front. There is the Hungarian national champion Laszlo Bodrogi. Saw him very early on in the season when he was riding in the Tour of Langkawi.
Yes, I think he's probably finding a big difference in the temperature right now, judging by the long sleeves and the training legs there he's got on, because the weather here is rather cold, but it's very typically Belgium. In fact, Scott Sunderland said at the start it wasn't cold enough. Well, Scott speaks fluent Flemish because he lives in Belgium, found his wife here during his career as a professional, and he now works with the team CSC on the direction of that, and so he knows all about weather in Belgium. Here we are, the Berendries for the peloton, 7.1%. That's the average gradient. We've got a max of 12.3, so it's not overly steep, but it certainly brings the old heart up to maximum as these riders dance their way towards the summit. And again, I've got a feeling there's going to be nobody pushing the attack here. Bodrogi on the right, not very interested in moving clear. Eekhout playing, well, it's very typically a Belgian style of racing, watching and waiting.
Well, I think this climb is a very famous climb in the sport and history of professional cycling. It was on this climb at one time everybody was waiting for the Tour of Flanders to head down to the Mur de Grammont for the final attack of the day, and it was here, almost at this point, that Johan Museeuw jumped away and surprised everybody and rode away to a magnificent solo victory. It is a difficult climb, especially in the early part of the season, as you say, Phil, for a lot of these riders. Many of the races they've done so far, well, in fact, Jimmy Casper is still, I think, caught in the middle. He hasn't yet been caught by the main field, and there's a problem at the back. Astana not looking happy.
No, is it a puncture? I think it is a puncture rather than a fall. Teammate saying, well, do you want my wheel or not? And I think the answer is probably not, just at the moment. Didn't seem too interested at all.
But, well, let's have a look. So I think actually, yes, he did go down.
Yeah.
Just in the middle there. I didn't see exactly how it happened, but you see a lot of these riders were not really riding that hard. Just having a look and see exactly what happened there with his machine. Oh, he snapped his handlebars. His handlebars snapped there. You can see that was... well, that is amazing.
Well, the rider, it was Sergei Ivanov who had the problem there, Paul, a twice champion of Russia. I didn't recognise him in the Astana colours. I normally see him in a Russian national champions jersey, but well, that's the end of that race for him. Poor old Sergei. Still, there's a long way to go in the year. 2.5 minutes now, still getting clear. Somebody going away here from Lambau Credit.
Yep, we're looking at 79 kilometres to go to the finish, and still no real reaction at the front end of the main field. I think Eekhout, as you can see in the Belgian national champions jersey there, Phil, is just trying to make himself seen to the crowd. I don't really see him as a man placing in the top 10 down towards the end. It's a very difficult run in Het Volk these days, because once the riders have gone over the Molenberg, which, as you said, is an awful long way to the finish, I think about 65 kilometres from the summit of the Molenberg to the finish line, it's really in the last 25 kilometres that this race then starts to get very difficult, because there's a series of cobblestone sections, some of them up to 2 kilometres in length, and they will still, I think, be slippery, because they're right through all the work fields on the run into the finish line in Lokeren.
Well, if you ever have to stand in these fields, then forget it, because your feet weigh about 20 pounds when you walk off the fields. The way the mud sticks to you is unbelievable in the Belgian fields. I think it must be something in the ground that they put in for the crops. But there we are, these are the riders going through. I hope they don't fall in those fields, which isn't unheard of, by the way. As the breakaway here continues to make ground at 2:38 now. This is the rear of the peloton, and sitting there right at the back at the moment, number 156, that would be Torsten Schmidt from Wiesenhof. They've got a new co-sponsor this year.
Well, it must be...
he's got a problem too.
Well, I think he just wants the team car to come up right now. He was just adjusting his overshoes there. As we look here at the front end of the main field, this was the move that went from the rider from Landbau Credit, and it's one of those attacks that nobody in the main field is really worried about, because if you look at the way this guy's riding, he doesn't look like a rider to me who inspires an awful lot of confidence. It's Yannick Kijks who's actually managed to get off the front, and I think he's just looking to get himself a little bit of television face time.
Well, I thought it looked like Jan when he attacked, but I didn't have the courage to say it, because I couldn't think of anybody else on the team who would try and move like that. He's got a gap at the moment, but it'll come back. 77 kilometres to go now to the finish. This is the opening big Belgian semi-classic of the year, Het Volk. And it's a race which many riders established their reputation by winning. They've had some great winners of this race in the years gone by.
Well, obviously I may well have been very wrong there, because it's in fact Chocolat Jacques who have come to the front to set the tempo, Phil, and I think they're obviously doing that for their man Nico Eekhout, who is the Belgian national champion. He obviously feels in fine form. I think this is a little bit of a suicide mission for them, because we're still a very long way to go. There's obviously a game of poker going on. You can see the Predictor Lotto, they're not going to work at all. There's Torsten Schmidt still at the back. I think he's basically just looking for his team car, but Predictor Lotto are actually trying to move up to the front, because I think they want to go and talk to their man Van Summeren, who is outnumbered by the two riders from Quick-Step.
Frédéric Amorisson is wanting his team car to get rid of his racing cape by the look of it here. So it looks as though temperatures are getting a little bit warmer now, because they know there's only one climb ahead of them, the Molenberg, and then it's all heads down to try and bring back.
I was waiting for that. Did you see? He tried to squeeze on the little piece of smooth road, a cycle path over to the right-hand side, and unfortunately there was a car there. I thought he'd almost made it, but a little bit of excitement there.
I bet his heart missed a beat then, but he'll be okay, back in the action, no doubt. Not quite where he intended to be. He'll now be at the back of the peloton, I would think. 2:52. We're pushing this up to 3 minutes at the moment, and Kijks has not given up. He's still riding a lone furrow down there, trying to reach them. So it's 2:55 to the peloton, and he'll be around about 2 minutes and about 10
seconds. Well, in fact, he's caught and passed Jimmy Casper. If I was Jimmy, I'd actually sit up right now and put up the white flag and wait for the main field, even though they're an awful long way behind. But that's an indication that Casper is going backwards and not forwards. Now it's Rabobank's turn to come to the front. And they're obviously, I think today, Phil, pretty much banking on their man Juan Antonio Fletcher. This is not an organised chase yet, but I think they're just placing themselves towards the front, because very shortly, you know, we are going to line up for the Molenberg. There's Tom Bonen over to the left-hand side. Just checking out on these riders from Rabobank. There's big Matty Heyman on the front. Always does a good job for the team.
Commonwealth Games champion. He won his title in Melbourne in March last year, and had to ask his team if they would release him, because not all of the American Pan Am Games.
Well, it was a big battle between him and Rabobank, in fact, to get released. And in fact, there was at one time a threat to remove his contract if he attended the Commonwealth Games. But for an Australian, in fact, for anyone in the Commonwealth, it is a huge title. And for him, I think he was well honoured in getting that victory. And, of course, taking the risk, Phil, to represent his country.
Absolutely. 3 minutes and 5 seconds. 75 kilometres to go, and the race still in the brink of is it being decided by this breakaway, because there was a stage here when it looked as though Nico Eekhout had marshalled his boys to hold that breakaway. The gap is being prized open. There's a very typical unless the sun shines, and at this time of the year I'm afraid the sun is as rare as a high temperature.
Well, you know what, Phil, I think Team Rabobank are the team that's going to have to do the majority of the chasing here, because they're not represented in that leading group at all. And I think today they will probably count not only on Juan Antonio Fletcher, but also on Leon van Bon, who himself is the kind of rider who can come up with a win in a race like this in the early part of the season. But they're letting it go a little bit far out there at 3 minutes and 5 seconds, even though that time can be wiped away very rapidly down towards the end. I think now they're starting to get that little bit serious as they start to set themselves up for the Molenberg.
Well, this is impressive now. Rabobank have definitely been told you ride at the front by the team management, and maybe they've got a couple of candidates for likely victory here. Leon van Bon, for example, could pull it off if necessary. Fletcher, of course, he's in there as well. They've got a number of riders who could do it if they've got a little bit of form. And also Max van Heeswijk, who can really put in a punch for the finish if he can get down to the finish.
Well, they have decided now to set the tempo and do the pacemaking at the front end of the main field. A little bit of small, smooth cobblestones for these riders, and lying in second position as a group in the main field as most of the riders from Quick-Step who are not represented in the breakaway. And I think the reason they'll be doing that is to try and get their man Tom Bonen into a good position when we come to the Molenberg. I wonder if today they'll try and get Pieter Van Petegem up there as well, because in the past, Phil, Van Petegem is a man who's very much dominated this race. He's won it 3 times throughout his career.
Yes, he has, and he's also ridden well in the other spring classics like Paris-Roubaix and the Tour de Flanders. He was very upset last year, and so he left his Lotto team and he moved across to Quick-Step. Well, a rival Belgian team, not a good idea, because you get heavily criticised in the press and you take a gamble with your supporters. But I think Pieter Van Petegem had to make the move if he wanted to ride his last year and try and shoot at these classics for one final time. Right now he's going to benefit from this. Remember, he's got 2 teammates in that breakaway, which is eased out to 3:10. Matty Heyman here helping drive on the Rabobanks. I'm surprised we're not seeing it close down. It just gives you some idea how well that breakaway is going just now.
Yeah, but I think it will all start to change, Phil, once we go over the summit, of course, of the Molenberg. This is what it looks like in the achteraan van de peloton. This is Greg van Avermaet. Now, that's a name I hadn't heard of until the start of this year, but in fact, this young man won himself a stage in the Tour of Qatar, and he was a bit of a surprise, because I think Quick-Step thought they were going to walk away with all the stages in the Tour of Qatar this year, but he was the young man who actually beat them on one day.
So there's the peloton. He's having a bit of trouble hanging on to the shirt tails of the peloton today, it looks like, unless he was back there for service requirements. 73 kilometres now. Now this is the move, but look at that, they've pegged the breakaway. It's staying at 3:10. They're riding at exactly the same speed as those 8 riders up front, and 3 minutes is a good gap if we're getting to the Molenberg. We're not too far away from it now.
also you can just see over to the right hand side, Team Liquigas are starting to move forward as well, and I'm sure they will be trying to move their man Filippo Pozzato to the front end of the main field. We're now going through the small town of Rozebeek. The central piece of any town in Belgium is the church. If you can never find your way around, always head for the kerk, and that's where you will start to find your way around these little villages. There's the main field, 3 minutes and 10 seconds, and I wonder when Team Rabobank are really going to start to turn up the screws if they want to set something up for Van Bon or of course Juan Antonio Fletcher down towards the end.
Just a little reminder, we're still in Belgium, just a mere 100 metres of cobblestones coming up now, and the gap is holding more or less. So Rabobank are not getting any closer to this breakaway, and ganging up on the right, interestingly, is Leaky Gas now, also bringing their men to the front.
Oh, it looks as if there's been a little bit of movement there down the right hand side. That is not a big peloton left here, Phil. A lot of riders I think have been left by the wayside. Matty Heyman moving up into second place. Well, Van Bon is the man actually riding at the front, former Dutch national champion, so I don't think Van Bon will be going for the win today. I think they're going to count everything on their man Juan Antonio Fletcher, and it always amazes me because Fletcher, as we've said so many times, is one of the rare Spanish riders who actually loves to come up here to the Northern Classics.
Yes, he does, and Fletcher himself now is heading up for 30 years of age, but he's ridden well in this race. He was for third, he's been second, he's been placed in all of the classics around the early part of the year. This one particular race he's never actually shone in, but he's certainly shone in Paris-Roubaix and Ghent-Wevelgem. They're still to come, of course. And he is a one-day rider. He's an amazing bike rider, a great stage win in the Tour a few years ago now, but he's an aggressive rider. Now, if he's told the team he feels good, then the team are going to ride, and that seems to be the case right now.
Definitely. I just caught a glimpse there at the back of the field, Phil, of a skill jersey, and every time I look at those skill jerseys nowadays, I always am reminded of the great Sean Kelly, because that's almost identical to the jersey that Sean Kelly raced in the middle part of his career.
And Sean Kelly's around the region too, by the way, now, because he runs the Sean Kelly training squad for Irish cyclists. He has a house in Belgium, and the cyclists live there, and hopefully we'll gradually see the Irish boys coming through the peloton again. Those magical years of Kelly and Roach, the two top cyclists in the world, both coming from Ireland and a population of only 3 million. It was really was the halcyon days of Irish cycling. It was tremendous. I think between them both they won every major race in the world.
Yes, I always find it a little bit sad that Sean Kelly never came up with the World Championships. He got so close on a number of occasions, and in fact the year that Stephen Roach won the World Championships, he rode the race, Phil, completely tactically wrong. He did everything to prepare the final for Sean Kelly. And unfortunately for Sean Kelly, Stephen Roach found himself in the breakaway with Marino Argentin at the time, and it was Stephen Roach who came up with a win. It
was. He had to win in the end. He looked over his shoulder, found Kelly had missed the split in the last kilometre of the race. He thought, goodness me, I've got to win for Ireland, which he did, and that was the year in '87. When he became only the second rider ever to win the big three, which are the Tour de France, Italy and the world title. Needless to say, the other man was the great Eddy Merckx. Well, these boys are banging their head against the wall, but they're still getting. In fact, Casper has got back up here now to Kuyks, and so they look as though they're absolutely flying. They're on good roads here at the moment, and they're scurrying towards the Molenberg.
Yeah, but they're in no man's land, and to me that's always a bit of a strange tactic when you're a professional bike rider. You have to make sure that you go with the move or get across to the move very quickly, because if you get stuck in between the breakaway and the main field, you lose an awful lot of energy and of course any chance at all of winning. And Jimmy Casper must by now realise that he isn't going to catch these leading group.
Well, stand by for the Molenberg now. It's literally just around the corner here. We'll see if there are any weak riders in this breakaway. It's a cobbled climb. It hurts, believe me. It is the last of the 10 of the day, that's for sure. But if there are any problems with these riders, then this is where we'll seek it out. Sitting at the back at the moment is number 22. He's the other rider on the squad, and that is Stegmans. His teammate is Sebastian Rosslaw, number 25. Van Summeren is number 15. He's looking to be, I think, possibly the strongest rider in this breakaway just now. Quinziato is the rider in the lime green. The Leaky Gas boys have changed the colours slightly this year, and you see a little bit of a help from Rosler. Not happening. We're about to start the climb, and Sebastian Rosler clearly is frightened of it, and he's sitting at the back. Here we go, the final climb of the day, and it is a toughie. There's the gradients for you, a maximum of 14.2%, 7% is the average. Not very high above sea level, but that doesn't matter.
It's about 45 metres above sea level, but it's only 300 metres in length to get up that 50 metres in altitude change, but it's the cobblestones that make it so very difficult indeed. And Stegmans is the man at the front, just hammering away there immediately, as you said and noted, Phil, marked there by Johan van Summeren, who I think is riding a very good race here. But look at this, I mean, we're talking the start of the season, and the crowds are already out in their hundreds of thousands.
Oh, they're fabulous. The Belgian spectators have to be the best in the world. The sport is loved here, and they're watching Van Summeren and Stegmans. Stegmans setting the pace here. What he doesn't know is he's hurting his own teammate, because Rosler is hanging on just behind here Kinziato.
Well, the main field will also start to pick up the pace as well, and in fact it's no longer Rabobank on the front, and it's the dark blue jerseys of Quick-Step. That, I think, will be to set up a nice move, of course, for Tom Bonen, because he wants to be comfortable and safe when they go around this corner, because as you saw there, you're going from a massively wide road, then all of a sudden it's a right-hand bend and you're on the Molenberg, which is very narrow and very dangerous, especially if you're sitting at the back of the pack. I think the main field must be around about 2 kilometres before hitting the Molenberg.
Well, one thing, looking at the timing here, we should be able to see the two in between, because they're only looking at 30 seconds now between the two chasers and the main field, inside 70 kilometres. You see they're racing quickly now, because they're racing for that right-hand turn, because there could be carnage at the back of this bunch, this wide peloton swinging off the big boulevard into that narrow cobble section. The boys at the back are going to literally stop and queue up to get onto those cobbles, and then they've got to close the gaps. So that's why they're riding hard at the front to hold position. This is what makes Belgian racing so pretty hard. Liquid Gas too, now I've seen the danger there, moving up there in the line of riders over on the left-hand side. They'll be trying to move their man Pipo Pozzato to the front. But this is why Team Quick-Step is such a brilliant team. They've got complete and utter control here. There is Tom Bonen himself looking around, trying to look to see where his teammates are. On Tom Bonen's wheel is Pieter Van Petegem. Now I wonder if Tom Bonen today, Phil, is going to try and work for Pieter Van Petegem and ask for a return favour a little bit later on in the year, when these riders line up, of course, for the Tour of Flanders. There's the right-hand bend. And here we go. They spread out at the front here, and they're onto the cobbled slopes here, but at the back they're queuing up. Be nice to go to the back, and we're at the back, and there's the queue I'm talking about, and riders stopping on the left of the road. Française des Jeux piling the pressure on at the front. Only 300 metres. The gap 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and coming down. And that's Robbie Mchugh in the wheel there, I think, coming forward. Now, you haven't seen Robbie Mchugh at all until just now, and then he sees this is an important moment. This is not going to be the deciding point of the race here, Phil, but for the guys at the back, it's a place where they will use an awful lot of energy, because being stopped like that and then having to accelerate, look at this. This is why it is so difficult riding at the back of the group. Thierry Marichal was the rider number 4 there from Française des Jeux. Won't like that, he's a Frenchman, and he's been around a long time. There he is on the right of the road. I think there's been a bit of a tumble here, because that is Ludovic Auger. Also with him is Casper, looking over his shoulder, and I'm afraid it's the catch for Casper, as we're now down to just Kykes, and there is Kykes as well. So they're just waiting now to be joined. Maybe the move was to get over the Molenberg ahead of the race, avoid the carnage, and now get back into the lead group in the peloton. If that was the move, it was a pretty good tactic. Well, I think they'll be happy to get back into the warmth of the main field, because it certainly is not the warmest day in Belgium here, Phil. We're just tickling above freezing point. Kykes has survived. He has got himself over the Molenberg, and now he'll have to try and recuperate a fraction in the main field if he can, but still not too far away from the front of that main field. There's a large number of Rabobank riders, and of course Tom Bonen got himself over there nice and comfortably indeed, because he's sitting in around about 4th position in that dark blue Quick-Step jersey. Kykes slipping back into the bunch. A rather slimy wet corner they just come round there, but let's have a look down the back end of the peloton. Here's whatever has happened at the back. We're getting a flashback of it here. Oh, and it's the slipping wheel of Auger here. He can hardly turn those pedals, and if he can't click his foot out pretty shortly, he might be falling onto the cobblestones. They're rather slimy. Anyway, he's on his way. It's his teammates doing the hard work at the front here. and they are driving now. This is the big push. They're over the Molenberg, 68 kilometres to go. Time to go out and pick up those 8 riders. 2.5 minutes is the gap. I think they've let it run a little bit too far here. And there is the barren wasteland of Flanders. Even the crops haven't started yet.
Well, that was Frédéric Guédon doing the work on the front. The man who last year, if you remember, was the winner of Paris Tours in a very dramatic style. But I think he's obviously announcing the colours early on too for Française des Jeux. They are obviously today, Phil, going to work for their man, Philippe Gilbert.
Sitting at the back here, Maxi van Heeswijk, but at least he's in the right part, is he? I'm not sure where the peloton is. We're right at the back of the peloton here. If we are, then Max is in the wrong place. But we've got the big split here now. This will be a pursuit amongst the groups now to try and repair the damage done on that last climb of the day in the Molenberg. Just look at the speed of the peloton.
And just look at the Molen. The Molen actually means the windmill. This is the climb of the windmill, and that was a very typical Belgian view. We're back here with the leading group of 8 riders.
Well, yes, I think we are.
Well, yeah.
Another windmill if there is.
Well, no, this is a group of riders. This is still the Max van Heeswijk group trying to get back on. A little bit of chaos. In fact, a number of riders split off the back there because of the Molenberg. And it has had an effect on the lead as well, because the lead has now crept down a bit to 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Guédon has done a very good job here in splitting the main field, but there's not been a decisive split, because I still make it around about 80 riders in the lead group.
The renaissance of Frédéric Guédon came last year in Paris Tours, because the only other big race he ever won, of course, was the Paris-Roubaix. So the 100th Paris Tour going to Guédon as well. That was in October last year. Now he seems to have be the workhorse here for his Belgian teammate Philippe Gilbert, who wants to try and repeat his win of just a year ago. Looking down the select peloton, Laszlo Badrogi is still in there. And it's still a big peloton. Nico Eekhout, the champion of Belgium, has made the split. In theory, this peloton should go to the finish now. And let's see as we pan back whether there's anybody else getting on. There's no team cars back there. They'll be blocked on the Molenberg. There's another big group. It's actually going to be a big peloton before long.
Yep, that's the damage that the Molenberg has just done. A lot of riders scrambling to try and get back to the comfort and warmth of the main peloton this afternoon, and that's the important thing. That's why you see these great big sprints. They're almost sprints for the corners, as if these riders were going into the finishing line, because it is so important to be placed in the first 5 or 10 places when you come to climbs like that, especially on a day like today, when, as you saw a few moments ago at the back of the group, if you cannot ride up the climb with power, you actually can't get any traction.
Well, damage has been repaired. The peloton is more or less compact again. 2 minutes 35. When they started the climb, it was just on 3 minutes, so they pulled it back just a little bit. And still a lot of work to be done, but there's still a long way to go. It's over 40 miles to the finish, 66 kilometres. It looks as though Guédon is not interested in any help. He's got himself into a nice little flow here, and he's going to keep the pressure on. The rain has stopped, although there's plenty of water around, as we go back up to the leaders, and they are still intact. The same 8 men still riding pretty well. I think that Roessler at the back here has gone through his bad patch. Well, he's still in it, but he's still at the back. But I mean, he's over the hills now. He flexes his legs just that little bit. He needs to get up and tell Geert Stegmans, his teammate, just to ease off a little bit and give him a chance. Well,
Stegmans, I think, is getting a bit excited about the proposition here of maybe surviving as they get onto this long section of cobblestones. This is the Paddestraat, and it is a very famous section of cobblestones. It's actually used in the Tour of Flanders later on in the year, and it's 2.3 kilometres. Oh, look at Stegmans, Phil, immediately straight across to the left-hand side of the road. He's trying to find the smoothest part of the ride that he can, but unfortunately, these little tarmac strips down the side of the Paddestraat are actually full of little holes, as you can see, which are full of rain at the moment, and you never know exactly what it's going to be like. So that's why the riders have opted, I think, to jump back onto the cobblestones, and even though they're a little bit slippery, take the advantage of actually not having a crash.
Well, Stegmans, the strong man, he wants somebody to come and help him here, because he's demonstrating the fact he's ready, he's willing, he wants to go away. But everybody else, I think, are just about in the red zone. There's not too many boys here with any extra punch. Stegmans has got good form, as I say. He won the opening stage of the Tour of the Algarve, so in February, so it's only a short while ago. and he's anxious to bring somebody across, and it looks as though it's Bonucci who's going to go to him. This is the guy you may remember won the stage in the Tour de France when the field fell off on that nasty wet right hand bend.
He could not believe his luck. He was riding for Fassa Bortolo at the time, and they were just about to catch Christophe Mangin, the French rider from Française des Jeux, who decked it in that final corner, and the main field, Phil, they went down like a deck of cards. He's a very good rider, Bonucci, and he's made the gap here. So too, of course, has Johan van Summeren. But Stegmans is not hiding or holding anything back at all here. He realises he's got good form, and he's got the possibility of maybe stealing the show today away from the big names.
And Stegmans just behind him is Bonucci. Just to finish the story, it was in Nancy where the crash happened. It was pouring with rain. It was a horrible day, and he hasn't ridden the Tour de France before or since. It was in 2005, but he's in the breakaway and has been all day today, and he looks as though he's feeling pretty strong, and obviously his performances are good enough to keep him in a top team, because he rides here for T-Mobile. Into the breakaway then. Van Summeren won't let much out of his sight, and the breakaway looks as though Kinziato might be the man struggling now, along with Rousselet at the back.
But just look how easy Stegmans makes it look. He's just sitting there powering away. He's looking a little bit further up the road in front of him, and people always say to me, well, how do you ride the cobblestones like this? Well, one of the most important things you've got to learn about riding over a section of cobblestones like this is not to hold the handlebars too tight. Look at how Frédéric Guédon is riding here. He's got his hands on the top of the handlebars, but he's not gripping the handlebars that tightly. He's actually allowing the front wheel to try and find the smoothest way across the stones. If you try and fight the bike will never win.
It'll bite back. Anyway, he's just keeping his rhythm going. It's unusual for Guédon to ride so well as a Frenchman, and of course his brilliant ride came. Guédon in French means handlebar, so it's rather fitting, as he won Paris-Roubaix. Well, the Peloton are all very happy to let one man do the pacemaking. The result is they're not closing the gap anymore. It's 2 minutes and 25 seconds. And we are getting closer to the finish now at 63 kilometres to go, and that looks as though Sébastien Rousselet has dropped from the breakaway. As we pull up to the breakaway, there it is. So he's the first man to go with 63 kilometres left. We have now 7 riders.
Well, sadly, he's got his own teammate to thank for that as well, Phil, because it's all because of the power of Stegmans. And here's Robbie Mchugh having a little dig at the front.
Well, Robbie's a remarkable rider, but he's been out at the front on the climbs. He knew when to be in the right position on the last climb of the day, and now he looks as though he's willing to perform here. He's already winning, as he always is at this time of the year, but tomorrow, by the way, it's a tough weekend, this, for the riders in Belgium. It's the Kuurne-Brussels-Kuurne Classic ride, and Mchugh also like to ride in that, I'm sure.
The funny thing is about even Kuurne-Brussels-Kuurne is they'll go over a lot of the same climbs that they've actually been over today, even though they start from a different point. The central part of Belgium, the central part of all of these races, is down in the Bergs. And sorry about that, Phil, but it looks as if Sébastien Rousselet has actually returned back into the group. So that was a very brave move.
And here's how he did it. Just recovered. They must have eased at the front. He can't believe his luck. He's back in the action. Well done. Back to the breakaway. Robbie Mchugh now. Former champion of Australia, joined by the current champion of Belgium, Nico Eekhout. And still willing to punch out here. Tom Bonen not far off the front either.
Well, that's Tom just over there to the right-hand side. Never very far away from a teammate. And although it doesn't look like those guys, Phil, are riding all that hard at the front, you can actually see the damage that's been done at the rear end of the race.
This is life at the back of the peloton. The skilled Shimano team, Art Vierhouten, who's been a terrific bike rider over the years, usually a teammate of Robbie Mchugh, but now on the skill team as he brings his career to a slight close. Oh boy, this dodging of the cobblestones, it really is a precarious way of living your life in Belgium, but it is a super country to race in. And Peter Gilbert had a win last year in an event somewhere. There's somebody at the bottom. Oh dear me.
That's a Française des Jeux rider there taking a few risks, and you see what happens here. The riders here are trying to ride over to the right hand side. It looks like Tony Cruz moving forward as well there. Riders taking the risks, Phil, to try and ride on the smoother road. You can just see the little guttering over to the left hand side. It is so much smoother on there, but it's dangerous when a car gets parked along it.
Absolutely. And Tony Cruz there, Well, he pulled himself out of trouble. It's Christophe Laurent is the number 97 rider here. But you know, Tony Cruz switching back to Discovery Channel this year. He thought he'd phase out his career last year and stay in America. He missed the racing in Europe so much he just had to get back to it. Well, there can't be more European racing than today for Tony Cruz.
Well, this is Erkki Putsep, who's the national champion of Estonia, moving backwards there as well. Just gives you an indication. Although we looked at those guys at the front, Phil, guys like Boonen and Robbie Mchugh, who looked as if they were really just cruising along, they're doing a serious amount of damage here at the back.
And the Peloton still no way of bringing back this Breakaway, who's working wonders right now. 2 minutes and 24 seconds, and going out as we speak to 2 minutes 25. Well, as we rejoin the action, we're at 48 kilometres to go now, and really it's been a story of a Breakaway being chased largely by Team Rabobank, and they've done a good job too, because 31 seconds is now the gap here, and the Rabobank boys seem to be working now for either Van Heeswijk or Juan Antonio Fletcher.
Well, that's why there's a big Spanish rider on the front there. This is Pedro Jorillo, who rides for Rabobank, and he is ripping it up. I do really think, Phil, they're going to try and set it up for Juan Antonio Fletcher. 28 seconds in these big, long, straight roads now. They'll be able to see that 8-man leading group, and once the leading group looks back and sees the shadow of the main field, that's going to be a severe blow to their morale.
It's been a terrific Breakaway, and they've never lost hope, but I think they'll be feeling a little bit shaky now, because 48 kilometres, that's 30 miles to race. Just on an hour at the speed the boys are going at the moment, slightly more maybe, 26 seconds the gap. Rabobank have made a long chase of this. They've been on the front the whole way, not a lot of help from anybody else. There is the Breakaway. They remain intact with all 8 riders still there. With the exception of a couple just dangling at the back, Bonucci at the moment and Rosselar, but in fact they've all stayed up, even though Rosselar's shown to be a little bit weak. He stayed in there.
And moving up there, looks like Stuart O'Grady over to the right hand side there in the white and red jersey of Team CSC. He's a man who really enjoys these kind of classics, and there's a little bit of a problem at the back here for a number of riders here. That looks like Leif Hoster. Now I'm surprised to see him. He may well have had a little bit of a problem with the rear wheel.
Well, that's why he's probably sitting down there. He's halfway through the field now. The whole team are around him. Note Robbie Mchugh is still up, and he's staying up near the front. And Nico Eekhout has got himself onto the bad end of the race here right now. He's just hanging in because the pressure's gone on. A long thin line. A tough moment for the Peloton here. Look at this. The whole of the Rabobank squad are now working up front, and they've got just Stuart O'Grady on the tail there for CSC.
Well, Team CSC, I think we'll count on Stuart O'Grady here this afternoon. Moving up the road, you can see that gap is coming down very quickly now, Phil. Just 21 seconds. These men dominated the race here this afternoon, but they never really got more than 3.5 minutes advantage. They were pegged by the main field. First of all, it was Chocolat Jacques who started riding at the front end of the Peloton to keep them there, and then over the last 30 kilometres or so, it's nearly all been done, the chasing, by Team Rabobank, who realised that we're coming into the final important phase. Once we get down to the last 25 kilometres or so of this race, there's a large number of cobblestone sections, and that's where I think we'll start to see the attacks happen.
Well, there's the diamond shape of the Peloton now, the long thin line of Rabobank, the body of the riders, and those just hanging on, hoping to stay there till the pace eases down that little bit. Well, it's going to be a long attack now, and once they pick this group up, then I think we'll see some more counter-attacks. The group knows now they're not going to survive to the finish at 46 kilometres left, as they're led round the corner there by Johan van Summeren again, on the wrong side of the railway tracks, but soon that'll be put to rights.
Well, there's the main field bunching up a little bit. They're almost now like an animal who is coiled, waiting to catch their prey. They now know they can pull this group back in any time they want. They don't want to do it too quickly, because they know as soon as they catch that leading group of 8 riders, there will be more attacks, there will be counter-attacks, and that will then make it very difficult, I think, for Team Rabobank to control the front end of this peloton. You can almost feel now the urgency. We're approaching just about the last hour of racing, and everybody knows in these early season classics that that's when the decision starts to be made.
Looks like the Rabobank are not wasting any time shutting this down now as they race along the banks here. I think it's the Shelder along the left of the riders just now. 14 seconds is the gap. Boy, that's fast over the ground right now. as they continue now to make sure that they nail them back. Here's the pursuit in stereo for you. The breakaway on the left, Van Summeren doing all the work. Looks as though he's listening to commentary from his team manager there, his earpiece. Well, his ears will be burning right now, because I think he'll be told it's all over. 12 seconds the gap, and those riders are in desperate mode now. A long breakaway, just 45 left to go, 155 already covered, and for the vast majority of them, those 88 riders have been in the lead. But now it's all over. The peloton greatly reduced from the big peloton of 195 that started this morning in Kent, but Loughran is where we finish, and it looks as though it's around about kilometre 45 where the break finishes.
Well, it looks like that's going to be the situation. Kinziata doing one small turn over at the front, but very shortly these men will be back in the main field, and I wonder how they managed to park that there.
Obviously needs only a short runway, that aircraft. I think this is the local aircraft museum here, as the barge traffic continues to course its ways across the continent of Europe, down the Schelde, which takes us into Belgium and on into France and Holland, as the peloton, no time to look left right now.
Certainly no time for these riders who are flying down the main road. They are bunching up a little bit. Again, I think just waiting a moment before they actually pull those riders back into the fold. You can see the dark black blue jerseys also of Team Discovery Channel riding up to the front end of the main field. They too now may well be looking for the moment to launch the counter-attack. This is the Kop van de Wedstrijd, but very much I would say we're about to be Gruppo Compacto, or group all together, maybe not.
There's an attack by Jacques here. Now these are the moments. Oh no, it's not. It's Cofidis who's actually made a move here. The new colours of Cofidis, the bright red colours, as they shoot off up the road. Not so sure who it was. Has it gone from the front group? If it's from the front group, I wasn't actually looking then. And it's Lecatre who's just made the move and gone off the front. A last desperate moment before the catch, I'm sure of that.
Well, somebody's gone across after him as well. It was a last moment just before the group came together. Here he is. It is the rider who was in that breakaway for a long period of time, but he's certainly here, Phil, just going to prolong the agony a fraction, but he will get Team Cofidis' name onto the television screens for another 30 or 40 seconds.
And that's about going to be it. These are the death throes of the breakaway right now, as the peloton continues to chase them down, picking them off one by one. There's another rider went after them, wasn't too sure, but it might be Kinziata, who's just made a run to try and join Lecatre. But the relentless pacemaking by Rabobank not going to allow this man to stay away for too long. 43 kilometres on your own. Now this can only be a show of defiance.
Well, you could see in fact that Team Rabobank weren't even worried at all. They know they can pull this man back anytime they want to. A little bit of precarious traffic furniture there that the riders have to negotiate around. It's amazing how you must remain so alert in these races in Belgium, because all of a sudden you can come round a corner like this one they're negotiating, and right in the middle of the road there's an island separating the cycle path from the road, and that is very dangerous indeed. Veteran.
This was the town I think where Jerry Knateman had a very bad crash many years ago. The great former world champion, sadly no longer with us. And this is Geoffrey Lecatre, who is now making his move. He's 26 years of age now, or almost. 4th season as a pro, and he hasn't won a race. But that doesn't mean you're a bad pro in professional cycling. You're a worker as well as a winner. And he's always ridden for French teams. 2 years, it'll be his 2nd year with Cofidis. He's had 2 years with Crédit Agricole. Don't bother looking over your shoulder, but I think I might save a little bit of strength now for the last 42 kilometres. There's last year's winner, Philippe Gilbert. He'll be feeling things going good right now. He's called his team off the front very early on when he saw Rabobank took an interest. He's riding a bit too far down the pack. Maybe he's not going quite as well.
I think he's probably just been back to the team car, because he's actually looking very attentive and very nervous as he was looking around to the right hand side there to see whether or not he could get himself up to the front end of the peloton.
So Lecatre, first man through Veteran, 42 kilometres left, and the peloton now are not going to run down and worry about him too much. They're going to leave him dangling just where he wants to stay, simply because they know the minute they catch him, somebody will take a flyer out of the pack. And so why not leave him there unless he volunteers to go back to them? Seems a good move right now. He's really working hard to stay away. 150 kilometres or so in the lead for this rider today. So why not grab television for just a little bit longer? Over the Schelde as we turn our backs on Veteran.
Yeah, the rider's now looking at, as they cross over the Escaut, as they call it in French, he's looking at around about 25.5 miles to go to the finish. They're just waiting now, and it's still Rabobank pretty much in control on the front end of this group, Phil, and they are now, I think, waiting to try and set themselves up for the repetitive stretches of cobbles which come in the last 15 to 20 kilometres. There's Sébastien Roseler, he's at the back, having a quick chat with the team car. And you can see one of the other teammates here of Team Quickstep as well, making sure that he takes on board drinks. That was Wilfried Kretschens, who earlier this year was the winner of the overall classification of the Tour of Qatar. Thanks, I should say, to Tom Bonen.
Well, yes, but he made the move. He got in the breakaway, got the time required, and then let Tom carry on winning stages. That's the way it works on a big team. 41 kilometres still left to go, and waiting now for the 40, and that's 25 miles. And, well, I never understand quite why riders think they can hold the whole field off, but they sometimes think they can.
Well, this is real, just Phil, I have to say, a professional move. It's a move to just keep Team Cofidis's name on television for a little bit longer. At the end of the day, that's pretty much what sponsoring a team is all about, getting the name out there, the name recognition, the brand recognition. And if you can see Cofidis for an extra 5 minutes on primetime television across Europe, that's worth a whole lot of money.
Christophe Laurent, who was riding at the back, and now he's going to be riding at the back again, I think, because his back tyre just went down. When your luck is out, your luck is out. At least the team cars are in regular fashion right now, so he should get a quick change.
Well, you see how he's not panicking at all. He's waiting for the team car to come up alongside him, and he stopped as soon as he knew that the team car was there. Relaxed, gets off the bike, allows the mechanic to take out the wheel. He slips that wheel in. The clock is ticking here. We're up to about 11-12 seconds. Again, a quick tyre change there inside of 15 seconds. A good professional move.
And that'll get him back in the race for sure, so he'll be fine. Another Frenchman here. They used to be teammates, these two, but not anymore. And Laurent coming back into the peloton, while Lecatre will come back in the peloton. Just a question of when right now, as he continues to ride and spread the new colours of Cofidis to the cameras. There's the pack rethinking the strategy now, while they leave one man to do all of the work. And no sign of spring yet in this part of Belgium. Now I suppose it'll come with the sun. Hasn't been a terribly hard winter in Europe, just occasionally a bit of frost and cold, but still spring is set to burst.
Well, Lecatre still surviving off the front end of the peloton. Look at them there, Phil. They look really, don't they, like a group of wild hunting dogs just waiting to pounce on their prey. They know they can rip this man to pieces anytime they want to.
I think you're right. The thing about the hunting dog is if it moves, he'll eat it. And
he's moving.
He's moving. And there they are, all together now. The job done well by Rabobank. It was a long chase, but they did it quite fluidly, using all of their riders except Fletcher and except Max van Heeswijk. So those two riders are the protected men for Rabobank. This great sponsorship out of Holland, where the sponsorship goes right down to school level and to women's cycling as well. It really is a complete sponsorship, and not just there for a top elite professional team, although that, of course, is the aim of the school children as they progress through the ranks.
Well, also it's spread right across the sport as well, because it's not just road racing, it's cyclocross, it's mountain biking, and of course it's they're getting involved a little bit now in the BMX. And so it is a huge program which is about to move across to the United States as well, because Rabobank currently are actually looking at purchasing a couple of banks in the United States to spread their fingers a little bit further around the globe.
That's a very good point. In fact, the senior personnel were present on the Tour of California, which has just finished. 38 kilometres to go. He's still riding like a champion, as the field just casually stroll up to him now and plan their next day. No more climbs left, all good roads, occasional cobbles, not many of those either, good wide boulevards, as we twist our way into Lokeren, which is just outside of Ghent. It's about half an hour's ride by motorcar up the freeway, and you'll arrive at Lokeren. Not the way the riders are going now.
Yeah, well, the riders now will be starting to think about the finish line in Lokeren, and in fact it's a change which happened about 12 years ago. This is a problem at the back. AG2R went down pretty hard there. In fact, this is one of the leaders of AG2R, and that looks like Renaud Dion, who went down pretty hard there. You've got to be very careful and attentive, Phil, on these roads in Belgium, because there's always a little strip at the side of the road. I'm not sure. Let's see if we can figure out how he went down.
Can't even see where they are. Right in the middle of the peloton. Bit of a shock there. Oops-a-daisy. The ride at the back there.
Nice move, I tell you, there by the rider from T-Mobile.
By Bonucci, who's just been caught and then did a front wheels handstand and survived. Well done.
Nice control, yes. Definitely nice control. But you can see just looking at the side of the road how dangerous it can be. Now, there's a little bit of a change in the situation here. I can only presume that Le Quatre has been caught, but now it looks as if we're looking at a serious move starting to slip off the front.
Yes, I think while we were distracted with the crash, they managed to snap up the one leader in front. Because our cameras didn't give us that shot, but we've now got 4 riders trying to go clear. And that is Le Quatre. There's 3 riders reached him, so that's what's happened.
And not for long, no, because look at the main field now starting to take a serious interest. We're getting to the section now, Phil, where we will start to come on and off sections of cobblestones, and that's why we will see a bit of an acceleration. You can see there's a big push there coming from Quick Step.
Well, this rider here is Bas Gilling from Wiesenhof. He was on the T-Mobile. He made the switch over winter. He's the first man to reach the 4 or 5 riders at the front and decided they're not going quick enough. He wants to get a move going if he can, while the rider's perhaps a little bit preoccupied by that shunt at the back of the race. Oh, we're going to see the catch now. Here it is. Oh, Ron, it wasn't a catch indeed. It was a move that came, and it was led by Bas Gilling. First man across to the leaders with a rider from T-Mobile. And this is now the current situation.
Well, I think that was Olaf Pollock, the rider from T-Mobile, and he slipped across there.
And Bas Gilling, I think, has been left alone here. He's proved himself a little bit too strong for the boys that came across, and now he's got to hope that somebody will join him. The report from the finishing line, by the way, is the sun has come out, and it's now warmed up to a very pleasant 12 degrees, but just here it's not long since the rain stopped.
Well, it's still pretty precarious. You saw just how carefully these riders were going around those corners because of the fact that the road is still a little bit damp on the front. We're looking now at a gap of around about 5 or 7 seconds. And Gilling here, in fact, is a Dutch rider on Team Wiesenhof. And his father was a bike rider, actually, Cor Gilling. He raced around about 25 years ago when I was racing. Seems like a long time.
Well, the rain hasn't long stopped here, has it? But he's getting his head down and he's going to have a go. And he is opening a gap at the moment. And this is the reason the riders didn't want to bring back Le Quatre until they had to, because they knew there would be a counter move. Let's have a look if there's any more counter moves. We're getting into crucial kilometres from the finish here now, where anything could go if you don't remain solid and concentrated. Rabobank have turned completely off since they brought back the breakaway. They've sent the men back into the pack, waiting to see who else is now thinking of a win today in Het Volk.
There's a lot of discussion going on there. You just saw the rider from Quick Step just pressing a little push to talk button on his jersey there so he can get some information back from the team management. In fact, it was one of the Discovery boys wanting to know, do we want to chase down now, or do we want to just leave that guy out there to fry for a little while? I would suggest my decision would be leave him to fry, because you're going to have to do a lot of work a little bit later on, because we're still looking at 35 kilometres to go to the finish.
Yes, so if you've got somebody out there preoccupying the riders, it makes a little bit of an easier ride. It's nice to see. It looks like Baden Cook about 4 men back having dinner. Pieter Van Petegem has moved up to the front, so that's interesting. He's feeling a little bit fresh now. Watch out, he's won this race 3 times before, as he now sits there in the peloton, but he's moved right to the fore now, so he's going to feel pretty confident. The gap is going out, 15 seconds, not a lot. 35 kilometres, little stretch of cobblestones.
Slippery cobblestones. So this is the Kasteldrief cobblestones, 900 metres, and that is the Castile, or the chateau, just behind us. We always think of France as being the country where there are a lot of chateaus, but there was a lot of bourgeois here in the Flanders going back 200, 300 years ago, and there's a large number of very impressive chateaus in the area. But now you see, Phil, once we get to these long section of cobblestones, you'll start to see the accelerations and decelerations at the front end of Het Volk, and that's going to hurt any of the weaker riders now.
I think this big man at the front now is Wim van Sevenent, the other tall man on the squad for Predictor Lotto. And remember that Leif Hoster is their leader today, along with Robbie Mchugh, but they've given Hoster the number 1, and he wears number 11.
Sitting there in second place, I think, is Stuart O'Grady as well, just popping his head around. He's been riding pretty much to the front end of the main field. He loves these kind of classics. He was robbed last year, Phil, of any chance of riding well in the early season classics, which he loves, because he went down in a very nasty crash in Tirreno Adriatico, and I think he broke, or he cracked the upper part of his leg and was off the bike for an awful long time.
Well, still it is Gilling trying to hold them all off, and he's down now to just 10 seconds after that fine piece of pacemaking by Lotto. So they're not going to let him far out of sight. New colours for Wiesenhof this year, still retain basically the green, a slightly new design. And now Gilling just looks over his shoulder, shakes his head, he thinks, what am I doing here? But nonetheless, he's going to stick it out for a while anyway. He's realised now they're chasing him, they're not allowing him any lead at all, and we've got an attack now from the peloton by Discovery.
Well, this is De Volder now, and he's thinking that this might be a good moment for him to try and get off the front. He's the kind of rider, Phil, they don't want to give him 50 or 100 metres advantage, because he's a very good individual time trialist, and this is the move that he made just a couple of moments ago.
Well, he may be doing this just to try and liven the chase up, because he's been brought back as we speak. But Stein De Volder sits up a little bit, the field rejoins them, 1 or 2 open mouths now. It's getting hard at this early part of the season to maintain the high tempo. And there's a big peloton heading towards the finish of Het Volk now, despite the 10 climbs we've had very early on, approaching the 20-mile point.
Well, just looking there, that was I wonder if Stein De Volder is thinking about Alan Davis down towards the finish, because Alan Davis is a guy who can pack a pretty good sprint, and there's still a large number of riders in this main field, or maybe even one of their new signings, Thomas Weitkus, because he is a very good track sprinter. So if there's a large group comes to finish down towards the end in Lokeren, maybe that will be the tactic for Team Discovery Channel, of course robbed of Georgie Hincapie because of that nasty crash in the Amgen Tour of California. That's
very, very sad. It was rather a silly shunt, colliding with his teammate Tony Cruz at the back of the field down on the west coast there, and the result was George has broken a small bone in his wrist, and that's going to keep him out for a couple of weeks, I think. Let's hope he gets back. He won't be back or in anywhere like on form for the early season classics in April, that's for sure. Well, 33 still to go, 10 seconds the gap. He's still keeping his head down. It's an annoying little attack, I think, as the counter move again is coming from a big turner here, I think from Van Sevenant.
Well, you can see now this is another move trying to come off the front. This is Rooms, I think, Roosums, the big rider from Team Lotto.
Roosums, yeah,
he's a big bike rider. I think he's the biggest bike rider in the field today. He rocks in at around 6'5". Quite a tall rider. He's got a rider from Unibet on his wheel there. I can't just see who is with him, but you can see now the movement at the front end of the main field, and Allan Johansson, I think, is the man doing most of that pacemaking for Team CSC, the Danish national champion. I think they're thinking about Stuart O'Grady here this afternoon.
Well, Stuart has had such an incredible couple of seasons, always in the placings, never in the first place. You need that little bit of extra luck to make it, but who knows? It's a new year, and let's hope he gets a good result. But there's the gap for you now, and it looks as though Roosums and the Unibet.com rider hasn't been recognised yet, and a leaky gas man is trying to reach them as well, and that will put 3 valued chasers. Now, is this a breakaway in the developing stages? It could be.
Well, this is a time when you are going on. These are incredibly good racing roads. They're small roads, they zigzag through the Flanders, and you're either going to the left or going to the right, but you really have to keep alert. Roosums, you know, is a big, strong bike rider. You can see he's decided that this is a good time to move, and I wonder if Team Predict or Lotto have heard from Robbie Mchugh to say, well, the legs are not so good here this afternoon, guys, so let's see if we can provoke a small breakaway to get clear.
Well, it's all over, whatever we say, because those boys have started the reaction here. Still just trying to get a look at the face of that Unibet.com rider. Clearly our television producer doesn't know either, because he's not telling us, as there's 2 riders clear, but the field are full charge. They're picking up the leaky gas boy. Well,
there's no need to identify him now, because he's back in the main field, which has been stretched out into a very long line, and there's not more than 3 or 4 seconds up to that 2-man group. But this is the achteraan van de Peloton, the back end of the main field, and you can actually see a large number of Rabobank riders, Phil, now starting to slip back. They are paying for the effort that they put in that chase early on, a long chase of about 30 kilometres on the front end of the peloton for them to pull back that lead group of 8 riders.
Well, this is professional cycling now, which starts at a steady pace and builds till the finish. That is a long line of bike riders now, and they're probably doing around 45 kilometres an hour. The face suddenly changing here of Gilling, but he knows now he may be starting something. He's got 2 riders coming up, so he's not going to sit up and wait for the peloton over that rather wet stretch of cobblestones, but at least it was a straight junction.
This is a good name for the street here. This is the Criminelstraat, and it's 400 meters of cobblestones, and that was pretty criminal just taking them over that for 400 meters. But you can see it is again still a little bit damp, Phil. We're 30 kilometers to go, 18 miles to go to the finish now, and we're starting to get into the very grippy part of the course, and these are not nice cobblestones.
No, and they're rather slimy today as he just hits them at full speed and rides right down the centre. That's the way to take the cobblestones, at least at first man. He can see exactly where the big holes are. He's been joined now by Roosums, and I'm not sure, but I think the Unibet boy is there as well. Zanotti has got there. Well, he's Leaky Gas who's come across.
Well,
sorry, no, Unibet, that's right.
He's joined Unibet this year. They've signed up a lot of very good riders. Just out of interest there, as you look at Hilling now in second position on the wheel here of Roosums. Hilling was second in the amateur Paris-Roubaix a couple of years ago, so he's no stranger to riding the cobblestone classics.
That's right, Zanotti coming across, had 2 wins for Leaky Gas last year, but Marco Zanotti now on Unibet, and already a winner this year, scoring a win in the Tour of the Algarve as well. So everybody enjoying the early sun in Portugal.
I tell you what, Phil, if you look at the long length of the main field there, you get an indication that the pressure is on. You see when you have to bunny hop there, this is the Steenbekerstraat, again a section of cobblestones that is used in the Tour of Flanders. Somebody from Rabobank here, the Rabobank boys here, Phil, they've done the job. All they can do now is just sit up and go to the finish, and I think that was Van Bon, and I think he's basically here this afternoon done all his work for the team. They're obviously banking, as you've said, on Max van Heesewijk or of course Juan Antonio Fletcher.
And the early season has bit, and so they're now going to ride into the finish at 29 kilometers to go. It's all over for these two. They probably won't be seeing the finish on bicycle today. But I noted that Zanotti didn't make it to the breakaway. It was a fantastic piece of hard riding there, being done by Bert Roosums. And I wonder if he's still up there while we've been at the back, because at 29 kilometers to go, this is now the crucial section, and he's still there. And he's joined Gilling, and they definitely got rid of Zanotti. So these two riders, strong piece of riding by Roosums. He came over those cobbles, he flew over them.
Yeah, very good ride by Roosums. Look how big this bike rider is. He's very longiline as well, very slim legs, but he's certainly got a whole lot of power. He comes up in front of Hilling. That's Hilling wearing number 151. He's a young Dutch rider. He's just 24 years of age. And they've got themselves an interesting advantage here of 10 seconds, Phil, but I don't think they will survive, because when we come to the next section of cobblestones, all they need to do is really accelerate at the front end of the main field, and I'm sure they'll wipe that gap out very quickly.
Yeah, it was a good effort and a very strong one. There's Zanotti going back into the field. Meanwhile, here come the counter moves again. Just trying to keep it alive, but 10 seconds the gap. They're always going to be chasing someone, they know that. And these corners over these cobblestones are always terrifying, with the cars parked just after the bend there. The Little Molenstraat now, 250 metres of cobblestones, 12 seconds the gap, and this looks like it's Stegman's here, yes. Well, it's the end of the breakaway, it's the end of the peloton, and I'm afraid it's the end of Het Volk, because enough is enough. But he's got a tremendous day of good training in today, in the lead for about 160 kilometres.
I tell you what, Phil, it is now starting to get just that little bit grippy as these riders realise they're getting into the real crucial racing part of the day. And let's not forget, they've been over 10 climbs so far, and that was just the hors d'oeuvre on today's stage as they moved down through the Flanders and the famous climbs of the Old Quaremont and the Mur de Grammont. But now, as we run into the finish towards Lokeren, there's a big repetitive nature of all these very difficult cobblestone sections these riders have to face. Some of the big names now are starting to look a little bit absent from the front end of this peloton. I haven't yet seen for a while the big figure of Tom Bonen.
Well, it's been a really aggressive race here, a very tactical one. They've used just one team to bring back the original break of 8. Now there's those guys, they tend to be looking after each other now. You see, there's no regular pacemaker here. Somebody does a turn at the front and takes a look at who else is going to give him a hand. And so this could have a sudden sprint off the front here by a rider trying to just get up there and get another move. Leaky Gas, there we go. Leaky Gas deciding the time might be right to try and soften the peloton up again.
O'Grady again.
It looks like O'Grady, it is.
O'Grady again, he's looking for all of these moves. They've got a little bit of a move off the front actually forming here, Phil, because Stuart O'Grady, I think, reckons he's got the makings of this afternoon. He looks good, and you see he's actually now starting to race very hard. And you might have noticed one or two riders in this latter part of the race now have started to take off their arm warmers. As you said, the weather is starting to come up a little bit, 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, but with the body temperature starting to heat up with this race, that's why these guys now are really starting to warm to it.
Well, look at the crowd here in Beringstraat. The man that started that move, by the way, is Roberto Petito of Leaky Gas, but these are the two who are still trying to hold them off. Now, in fact, Stuart O'Grady on second wheel here, he's only literally just arrived in from California. Clearly, he's not been worried by the jet lag. I don't know how these professional bike riders do it, but that's the new style of racing now. You travel the world in the months of January, February, and very early March.
Oh, Gilling here just dragging himself back to the wheel there of Roosum's. Big bike rider Roosum's. He had a victory last year in one of the early season classics like this, the Nokere course, which although not as highly ranked as Het Volk or Kern, Brussels-Kern, is still, I know, a very difficult race to win.
Well, this is starting quite a reaction now. They're all desperate to try and reach those two. Roosum's is holding them off just at the minute. O'Grady here is now feeling rather frisky at 26 kilometres to go. Nobody wants to come through and work with him. There's no reason for the quick-step rider not to come and do a bit of work. He's got nobody up front, but he doesn't want to do anything at all as they dodge the traffic signs on the left of our picture. And look at this. Nobody will help Stuart O'Grady at all, and even though they pull a little split away from the field.
The Rabobank rider you can just spot up there in about 4th position was Juan Antonio Fletcher. Now this is a bit interesting because this looks like Stijn de Volder. He's having a spotted bother too at the back here, Phil, and he was regarded as one of the leaders of Team Discovery Channel before the start of the day.
One of only 2 Belgians in the field today for Team Discovery, and looking as though he's also under pressure because they are going very, very quickly right now as they regroup at the front, and still got those 2 riders clear. 11 seconds despite the aggressive riding of O'Grady, who found he had no one there willing to help him in the least. And look at that on the far right now. Nico Eekhout has moved himself back up, the champion of Belgium. So he's moved from the back to the front with 26 to go.
Well, they're all moving up now, Phil, because Tom Boonen is right up in the top 10 or 12 places as well. He's starting to take a little bit more interest in this. Belgium is an impressive place to ride. You see that the guy there, he saw the opportunity there of moving up the main field, so he jumped across to the cycle path at the left-hand side of the road, went behind all of the trucks, almost as if he was trying to ambush the rest of the race.
Well, the Française de Jeu rider got
Gilbert.
Through. It looks like it is Gilbert, so last year's winner has made himself a move here. That'll cause a reaction. The guy who won for Belgium a year ago has got himself a Leaky Gas rider just behind him.
Well, let's not forget we're still looking at trying to bridge the gap of 15 seconds to the 2 leaders, Bert Roosum's of Team Predictor Lotto and of course Bas Gilling, the Dutch rider on Team Wiesenhof. For 15 seconds is not very much at this stage of the game, and in fact Gilbert has got himself a nice little move here.
How many riders? 5 clear. He's pulled them with a terrific speed here. 5 riders clear, and he's not going to ease up until he feels there's a gap there to call on. Somebody had a flat tire on the other side of the road.
It's all action. It is all action here for Team Unibet, and this is Arno Coyot who's gone off the back here, and for him a very quick bike change as well. It's important at this point in the race to try and they are all nervous. They all know they're live on TV.
They want to get shouted at by the rider when they get to the hotel tonight. That was a great change again. Gilbert now has decided to coax everybody else to give him a hand. We've got 5 riders here. Little bit of reaction coming from the peloton. Gilbert anxious to keep this move going. Matt Heyman is in it as well for Rabobank. Another Unibet rider coming across, so we're shortly going to be 6 strong.
Yeah, Phil, look at the faces on these riders now as they start to feel the pressure of this very difficult race. It's 200 kilometres, which in May and June in the nice weather is not really all that long, but I tell you one thing, it is difficult in the cold weather. I think that's Stefan de Jong sitting in the middle there for Quick Step. They don't want to take him to the finish because he would give him a fast pair of wheels.
And Bas Gilling is still in there as well. Let's not forget that Breakaway still there, 10 seconds. And now it's Stefan de Jong checking out in second wheel. Philippe Gilbert, who started the attack. We've got 3 6 riders heading up towards. I don't think we've caught the Breakaway. I haven't seen them.
Not yet. Just have a look at this. This is looking back a few moments ago as to when the move went, and you see that rider over to the right-hand side just ducked behind the cars to try and get himself an easy ride up to the front end of the peloton. That's like Matty Heyman there. Yeah. There are 2 riders in this group from Team Unibet, and they're still hanging on to around about 5 or 6 seconds over the front end of the main field. But I don't think, Phil, we've still yet pulled up Bert Roesems, and there's another nasty section of cobblestones coming up very shortly.
Well, I think the Unibet rider is Gorick Garden and possibly Lawrence ten Dam, because most of the other riders have been out of the hunt here today, one way or another. It's certainly not Baden Cook who's got himself up there. But we've got this little group. Here's the rider who started it all. He is so at home on these bad roads, yet it's nowhere like where he comes from. He comes down from the Ardennes.
This is that section of cobblestones I was telling you about. By the way, Gorick Garden is a Belgian, but he's actually naturalised Belgian. He started his life off as a Russian rider and moved across here a couple of years ago, and he's been pretty much adopted. This is the Koningsstraat, or the King Street, 700 metres of cobblestones, and Philippe Gilbert is really hammering it here. He's trying to establish a move off the front of this group, and then once they establish it, oh, this is Roesems putting Gilling into difficulty.
So they're still ahead, very much so, and Gilling is dropping back. Gilling is found Roesems, who came across a show of strength, is now using it too much to good effect. And the sky's looking a little bit as though it might rain again right now, but what a lovely picture that is as Philippe Gilbert bounces over the cobbles in the late afternoon, reflecting now that darkness comes here at around about 5 o'clock at this time of the year. We should be in before then, maybe 5:30.
Let's hope we are, and let's hope the rain stays clear, because as you can see here, there's a little bit of consternation there. Philippe Gilbert looking for a bit of help as they've come off the Koningsstraat, the King Street of cobblestones, and they're asking now to see whether or not Stefan de Jong can come to the front and ride a fraction. I wonder if this is an indication, Phil, that maybe Tom Boonen is not in great form so early in the season this year.
Where do you think he was? But it's a different type of racing now. The wonderful heat of Qatar, and now we're coming here to the chill air of Belgium. Remember, Tom isn't a resident of Belgium these days. He's moved over to Monte Carlo, and Baz Gilling deciding to just see what's going on with this breakaway, so he's coming back to it. Can he hang on to it? Philippe Gilbert gives him a glance,
and they've got themselves a very nice gap. There's the front end of the main field. Roesems now alone. He's a very good time trialist too, this young man. As we said last year, he won himself the Nokere course, but he's a man who's worked very hard for the team, and very hard, of course, for Robbie Mchugh in races like the Tour. There you can see the gap. It's not very much. It's about 11 seconds to that chasing group. I would think Roesems now, Phil, would be better advised to wait for those guys, because we're still looking at just outside of 20 kilometres to go. But they're extending their lead over the main field, because the main field have now slipped back to about half a minute. But Gilbert's not happy. Sign
of frustration, I think. A lot of guys have made the big effort to join him, but haven't got the effort now to continue the attack here. But he's got 1 or 2 to come through. Gilling sits on the back. Gap is only 12 seconds. Peloton is in the distance there, the further 12 seconds back. And this is Gorick Garden, who is setting the pace for Unibet.com. And Gilbert now needs a breather. He's done a lot to try and establish this, and frankly we haven't gone too far. Here's the frustration being released. Come on guys, give me a hand.
Well, he's getting frustrated, and that I have to say is very much, I think, that the Latin influence of his attitude, and he gets very frustrated. French riders tend to shout and scream a lot when they don't get things going their own way. He's now trying to talk to the Italian rider from Liquigas here, just to encourage the organiser, because he knows he's actually got a very good chance here if he can get 3 or 4 of these riders in this group to actually cooperate with him. And let's have a look at that gap, Phil, because that is a serious gap now. I wonder why they've turned off.
Well, they're in a straight line, so may have some teammates there trying to slow down the reaction, because they've got the narrow road. They can do it on this sort of a road, but 12 seconds to Group 2, that's not to the Peloton. I think the Peloton's out to well over 30. Oh, well, it's not. 22 seconds.
Yeah, they're saying 22 seconds over race radio, and that's a bit of a surprise to me, because it looks a lot longer. But let's not forget, Phil, those are only a guesstimate times. They're brought to us by GPSs, which are placed onto the motorbikes near the riders, so it depends exactly where the motorbike is sitting at the time as to whether or not the gap will be exactly correct.
It's still an improvement on the days the commentators have to use their own stopwatches to work it out from television pictures anyway. But there we are, 13 seconds to the first group, which we'll call the Group Gilbert, because he forced it as they now continue the attack. This is the rear of the second chase group, and sitting there right at the back is Kasper Klostergaard. He's the Danish rider on Unibet.com.
Well, Gilbert is doing an impressive job, and you can see there number Roosums is riding exceptionally well now. You can see how wet the fields are, but you know what, Phil, they are closing in on him now, this gap, and I think that's why Steven de Jong has decided to come to the front and do a little bit of work, because if he can pull himself up to Bert Roosums, he neutralises part of the attack, and for him, in the back of his mind, he's going to adopt two tactics here.
Well, they've been desperately under pressure in that peloton for an awful long time. It was Garden at the back of the group, by the way. I gave you a wrong name there, as he slipped down to the back. And we're looking now at the chase here being led. I'm not sure. Are we with the group or the peloton here?
It's the front end of the main field.
This is well. Why is the Lotto rider chasing down their own man, who's still up here dancing on the cobblestones?
It's slippy.
Because Bert Roosums here is riding superbly well. He's on the Heestraat. This is half a kilometre, and this is a sharp right-hand bend here as they come through. And still sitting at the back now is the Garden, and that's Gilbert, isn't it?
Yeah, Gilbert's gone down there, taking too many risks. Look how quickly he's got back up.
Well,
he's nervous.
They've all gone round him. He did well there, but he's taking longer to get his feet in here.
Phil, you saw the way he jumped on that bike there. I have a funny feeling, very much a Mark Madio style. He's done himself an awful lot of cyclocross in the winter because he. There's another crash in the peloton.
Well, this has brought a lot of people down here in the peloton. Number 158.
Oh, there's a bike in the ditch.
Jorgi Ludwig, and that's a CSC rider who's gone down there, and he doesn't look at all good at the moment. And that looks. Well, this is rather the same, because these are a lot of riders here, and they couldn't happen at the worst time. It's all happened on this.
Well, Race Radio, Phil, is telling me, in fact, involved in that crash, and I couldn't see it anywhere. They were saying that Tom Bonen was involved in that crash as well. I didn't see any riders going down from Quickstep, but that was a little bit of confusion there.
I saw Koen Barb was down there. He was one rider, and Kurt Huvelenik was also another rider who fell. Didn't quite see.
Gilbert's fault.
Gilbert, yeah.
It was his own fault there.
Don't know why, because the road just there is bad, but it's not wet.
No, but I think what happened was he just went over to the left-hand side. Let's have a look here and see what happens. This is the back end of the main field, and look how slippery these roads are. Unbelievable.
Yes, that's that rider there was Jorg Ludwig, who's changed teams. He used to be riding with Seiko in the old days. He's also down. But that might cause a reaction now that could, unfortunately, end that breakaway, which is still sitting at 12 seconds.
Well,
this is still the boys from Unibet.com.
But look where the main field is. They are right there.
Yes, it's all over now. There's been a rush of adrenaline here, and I don't think, in fact, Paul, Gilbert got back into this group. I don't see him at all.
Well, no, the main field.
The man that started it's been lost. The big motor, should we call him, is gone.
Yep, and the main field is there. But that section of cobblestones and that accident has really caused a little bit of turmoil in the main field. The main field looks to me to be split up into 2 or 3 different groups.
12 seconds the gap. 18 kilometres is still to go, as we're now running out towards the end of Het Volk, but the race is now all split up, believe me, as they try to recover from all that damage.
Well, there's another problem here. This is a front wheel puncture. This is a Chalingi, and he's got a front wheel flat tyre. This is the man who last year was the winner of the overall classification of the Tour of Belgium. Started his career off, Phil, riding for a very small team that races pretty much all over the world, the Marco Polo squad. Well, Bonen cannot have been involved, Phil, in that crash, because Bonen is right back there in this group.
12 seconds to the chase, 22 to the group, and it's going to all come together here now, and Tom Bonen is still in a very, very good position. That crash has released the adrenaline, and everybody now are on a free-for-all here, shall I say. A very typical Belgian race just now as they scrabble to find position.
17 kilometres to go. We're looking now at the front end of the main field. There's a lot of action going on here. There's riders going off the front, off the back, flat tyres. Everybody basically just trying to survive as much as they can.
Well, there's a desperate moment, turning left now as the chase continues here, and the gap now. I think this group is going to come together. We could well be treated to a group sprint here in 17 kilometres, just over 10 miles to run to the finish. Let's have a look where the leader is. I think Gilbert was unfortunate he fell there. It might have been a slightly different race if it hadn't happened, but Bert Roosums is doing a super ride.
He's doing a brilliant job here. Despite all of this action at the back, he still leads this race. This is the Vogelstraat, and the Vogel is actually a bird in Flemish. The birds aren't singing very much at the moment. I think it's just a little bit too cold for them. Roesems is riding superbly over these cobblestones. The second group is 12 seconds behind him, but only about 8 seconds. There's another crash here. Another crash for Chocolat Jacques, and I wonder if that is Overlink.
That's the second time he's been down. He looks, this time he looks pretty badly hurt. He sat right on the road here. Ouch. Help it ham very quickly from a spectator, I think, there.
I tell you, this is a tough race. It is so hard. It's hard to explain how hard it is if you fall on those cobblestones. You hinted at it a little bit earlier, but these little pieces of granite, they don't give at all.
Well, it's wiped out everybody now. It's one man trying to hold off the men who are staying upright in Het Volk just at this minute in time.
Watch this, Bonen's moving up.
Yeah, and looks on his wheel. That's Philippe Gilbert again. So the two big two are having another go. This is a big drive by Tom Bonen. There's no way this man has just fallen off. He's still in the mood to do something. Not too sure his form is too bad, Paul. Right.
May be wrong there, Phil. I know he rode exceptionally well in Qatar, but it's always difficult when you go from that warm climate to come back up here, and there's so much rumour and innuendo around Tom Bonen these days that you've got to be very careful where you listen and where you glean your information. But you can see that Bonen is good. Not far away from Tom Bonen, you'll spot an orange jersey of Rabobank, and that, of course, just peeping around there is Juan Antonio Fletcher.
So Philippe Gilbert has got control of the race. At one time he was up there, now he's back in the bunch and he's driving it again. Just looking at the peloton to see if he's opening up the gaps at the back. It's full pressure now. I think they're nearly on the back wheel of Roesems there. 8 seconds only is the gap, but that effort by Tom and by Philippe has split the peloton a little bit. Some, of course, are still coming back from that crash we've just seen. 15 kilometres to go. That is Leif Hoster.
Well, he's actually off the back of the group there, and that is not good for him. I think he obviously got caught out a little bit earlier on by that incident. He's trying to ride himself back up to the group with most of the major favourites. He may well do it, but you can see there are no team cars out there, Phil, because right now this race is starting to split up.
Well, they've been split because of the falls. The team cars won't be allowed past the riders. They've got to get back first of all. Leif Hoster's caught there. At least he had a flotilla of motorbikes all queuing up behind the breakaway or the peloton to try and get through to the head of the race, and they'll have to wait for their opportunity. This is still Roesems. He's got a very strong pair of legs today, but I still feel he's banging that poor old head against a brick wall. Here's the chase still going on behind.
Steven de Jong, now that he's seen the presence of his team leader in the move, he's decided to keep the pressure on at the front, but in fact he's going just a little bit too hard, and it seems to me as if he's dragging away Juan Antonio Fletcher. Just looking back, everybody scrambling across. This is the time when a breakaway can form, when you see 2 or 3 riders moving off the front, somebody else scrambling across the gap to get himself into contention. Once he gets there, he'll recuperate for 100 meters or so, then he'll go to the front and try and force a serious move off the front. But when you see this kind of action going on behind, you've got to take your hat off to the ride by Bert Roesems, because he's still only just surviving. There he is.
Yeah, it's very sad, but it is a great bike race down there now. Team tactics to the win now. Every man is using what strength they can muster and giving it a go at the front, and yet the peloton is still clawing its way back, and that flotilla of motorbikes thought they had it then, and they've all had to go back to the race, rear of the race again as they caught out on that slightly left-hand bend. There's the catch. It looks like Tom Bonen and the boys have brought them back with some big effort. Well, he's not caught yet, and he won't give up until he's caught. 14 kilometres to go. His one hope would be a breakaway. That hasn't been the case today. This is quite a big sized peloton bringing him back.
Well, there's Leif Hoster there, Phil. He obviously didn't get across the gap there. He tried to get himself back into the group at 15 kilometres to go, and that to me would put him around about 30 or 40 seconds behind the group that contains most of the other leaders. So it's not going to be a great day for Leif Hoster here this afternoon.
Just looking around the corner, that peloton has gone. That's the split, and there's a little split off the front here too as they get around the corner, and the motorbikes at last are beginning to make a way through, because it's a shame, because on these narrow roads they have a huge problem, but they can affect the formation of these pelotons.
That's why it's so important to have a good team around you, because when it comes to a moment like this, you need teammates alongside you all of the time, whether it be to pace or whether it be to change equipment. Roesems, Phil, has not given up yet, and he said, sorry boys, if you want me, you're going to get right onto my back wheel, because I'm having nothing of this. And look at Steven de Jong. Look at his face there. You can see his face is ripped up in pain, and he looks over his shoulder and says, come on Tom, where are you? please can you take up the pacemaking now, because I'm fed up chasing everybody down.
Huge effort, over and done. Rusum's back in the camp. There's the team car pulled off as well, and now it's a question of assessing who is here.
There's O'Grady.
And who's looking like it, and O'Grady isn't waiting to do that. This is a move by Stuart O'Grady. He comes right up here behind the camera motorbike, and there he is. He's not quite as close as our cameras show you, is he? There's a big gap there.
I tell you what, Stuart O'Grady is a battler. He's a fantastic bike rider. Came with a great pedigree from the track, once the best track rider in the world, and now he's riding superbly on the road as well. But Fletcher is trying to get onto the wheel there of Stuart O'Grady, can't quite make it, but they've got a gap.
Well, Gage has got the gap, and is he getting help? Is it Juan Antonio Fletcher who's trying to reach him? Because it looks like it might be, and if it is, that's a terrific duo at 13 kilometres to go.
Well, that's a good tandem, and if they can get together, but look at that, you see Fletcher hasn't yet got to the back wheel of Stuart O'Grady.
Shows you how quick
He
Stuart's
is
going.
scrambling to get there. It's splitting the front end of the main field up as well, because there's a small group of three, another group of three, then a slightly larger group. This could be, Phil, the big surprise that catches out all of the Belgians today, because Het Volk is their race.
Absolutely. You've got to remember they've been under pressure now for 25-30 kilometres, where everybody's been giving just about everything they've got left. O'Grady may have gone at a good time. 13 kilometres to go. Fletcher, he knows, is a solid workhorse. Going to have to give him a couple of kilometres maybe to recover from the chase. That looks very much like the shape of Tom Bonan, who's just launched off the front of that chase group.
It is Tom Bonan. There he is on his own. He said, right now I'm the leader of this race, now I'm the leader of the team, I must now take responsibility, because you don't give 10 or 15 seconds to Juan Antonio Fletcher or to Stuart O'Grady.
Well, I have to say now that Bonan's obviously recognised the quality of those two men and decided time is time and I've got to go. 12 kilometres to go. He's giving just about 100% here, and he's flying across on a huge gear. He's pulling away from that chase group as we pull away to see where they are. Just look at the speed of Bonan coming up to these two leaders, and they won't know it yet.
They won't know it yet, but now Fletcher has seen that they've got themselves a very good opportunity, because he's had a bit of a rest on the wheel of Stuart O'Grady, got his heart rate back down a fraction, got rid of the lactic acid, and says, right now I'm going to work with you because we've got a very good chance of survival. But Tom Bonan, people dub this man as a sprinter, Phil, but you've got to take your hat off to him. He's no sprinter. He is a man who can race. He's a racer.
He goes into breakaways when he gets his chance. I mean, nobody wants to work with him, of course, because they know if they take him to the finish, he'll win the race. But even so, he does look for victories other than by sprinting. He's a very strong bike rider. Big effort this, but I think he might reach them. Juan Antonio Fletcher, O'Grady setting the pace. O'Grady looks like a track rider even when he's riding in Het Volk, but here comes the ex-world champion of 2 years ago.
Well, he's locked in at about 150 metres. This is a big sprint for this man here. He's looking at 11 kilometres to go. He gets out of the saddle. He's forcing himself to try, and there you can just see the armada of bikes up there, Phil, and that is in fact the leading group of two riders.
So Tom Bonan now is face a picture as he tries to go and bridge the gap with 11 kilometres left to ride, and the field have got no answer. Oh, you should never say that, Phil, because the field do appear to have an answer here. They are coming back onto Bonan. I'm surprised at that. I thought it was over.
Well, I thought Bonan was locked in at 100 metres. I thought he had a pretty good advantage over the front end of this main field. Now there's another rider coming forward now to whip up the pacemaking, and look at Tom Bonan trying to get onto the wheel. I think that is Pieter Pozzato, his former teammate.
Well, I think it is Pozzato. He's come across the gap here, and he's gone straight to the front. He can speak English, but I don't know quite what he's going to say to Tom Bonan right now. He flicks his arm, nobody coming through. Bonan's the only man left, as we've got four riders here gripping their teeth, and I think we've also got, apart from Pozzato and Bonan, we might well have Baden Cook there tapped in, because he's the rider in white.
Well, the thing is, these two riders now, Phil, are working very well together. They've got themselves a good cooperation, and that may well be enough for them to survive, because to catch these two riders, you're going to have to get yourself a very organised chase. Bonan is still trying to do it. That is Baden Cook there, and that is Pieter Pozzato, and the other rider in there is Nick Noyens.
And this is Pozzato also driving on, and they say he's on fire with form. And the face of Tom Bonan, Paul, they are under pressure. I'm not so sure they're going to say enough is enough.
Well, they've got a big chasing group there. 10 kilometres to go now. That's around about 6 miles. Bonan is not going to give up. You know what? Bonan may not be the man on fire here this afternoon, because he couldn't get across to those two riders. The gap 8 seconds. Not very much, that, is it? That's around about 100 metres. Just looking around the corner to see if I can spot Stuart. Phil, that is more than 10 seconds as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it seems to be a little bit more, but the two riders aren't waiting for anybody now. It's gone out to 11. They must have been listening. And so this is Stuart O'Grady and the lone break expert, the man who likes to ride the classics from Spain, Juan Antonio Fletcher. And Noyens now has got himself to the front. How many riders are there who've been teammates of Tom Bonan's in this chase?
Well, look at Bonan out of there. He's a strange figure, Tom Bonan. He's a huge bike rider. It looks very gangly and ungainly on a bike sometimes, but I tell you what, when it goes to going fast, he certainly knows how to do that. That gap is coming down now. There are the four chasers just at the bottom there, and there you could just quickly glimpse the two leaders in front. Pozzato looks pretty good. Bonan looks to me like he's suffering.
I think that chase hurt him a lot. And Noyens, here he comes. He won this race a couple of years ago, and he was a teammate of Tom Bonan's then. Four riders, a Fiorennes, and Baden Cook is a good sprinter. He'd give Tom Bonan a run for his money today, I think.
Well, the thing is, these riders are accelerating and then slowing down, and that might turn the advantage to the two leaders. You can see Noyens now, as you say, former teammate. There is Bonan. Cookie is really grimacing now. If they take Cookie to the finish, he could create the surprise.
And Pozzato looks as though he's the best of the four, yet he's having trouble closing the gap. This just shows you these are four terrifically talented bike riders. They're right at the limit of their ability today, but they're willing to get in there and suffer and try and hold this field off. And they're trying to prise open a little gap because they know that field is holding them back. And I'd love to know just who is doing the chasing now. It must be Rabobank.
Well, we're looking at 5 miles to go to the finish, 8 kilometres. Cookie keeps dragging himself back into this, and they're looking at around about 100 metres, the difference between themselves, this four-man group that we're looking at, and these two men here. Juan Antonio Fletcher looks pretty good here. He's got himself into a nice position, keeping the pace nice and high. O'Grady looks very comfortable, I reckon, Phil. If these two guys go to the finish, O'Grady's going to get this one.
Well, that would be a great result, I have to say, for Stuart, because he needs a big one after all the near misses. But you know, Pozzato down there, he's ridden this race a number of times. He likes the early season race. He's twice finished 6th in it. He's right in the frame. If he finished last of this group right now, he'd be 6th again. And Baden Cook also there, a good sprinter. And Pozzato, let's not forget, won the Tour de Haute Var just before this race began as well. We're into the town of Loughran, but we've still got 7 kilometres to go.
Well, there are the two leaders, and I tell you what, the gap is coming down slowly but surely. It's 11 seconds officially, but I make it 8 seconds as they come here and start to circumnavigate the town of Loughran. There you can see, Phil, that is no longer 10 seconds at all. They're pretty close here, and O'Grady's now decided to move.
Well, he's obviously not happy with the workload here of Fletcher, or he sensed that the rider in the relays is getting a little bit tired, but he's straight up there, Fletcher. He's never had a great performance, by the way, in Het Volk, but he does ride well in the early spring classics, Juan Antonio. This is the chase behind. They're not getting any closer to those two leaders. It's looking very, very good for the breakaway. The peloton is dropping back ever so slowly.
Oh, it's so close, though, because there they are, Phil. We're looking now at about 75 metres advantage, and just looking there at Juan Antonio Fletcher, I think his position, he finished 4th in the Paris-Roubaix race. I think that's the best performance ever by a Spanish rider in that Northern Classic.
It certainly is. And now Fletcher takes a good look at Stuart O'Grady. It will be an interesting sprint, this. Sorry about the little bit of picture breakup. We're in amongst the trees now as we're in the town of Loughran. A guy called Philly at once finished 3rd in a race here. Can you believe that?
I can believe anything you tell me, Phil. You say it with such conviction. I tell you what, we'll listen to this for some conviction. Look at Stuart O'Grady here. He looks absolutely fabulous here this afternoon, looking over his shoulder for the Juan Antonio Fletcher to come forward and do another turn. There are the four chasers. The official time gap they're giving us is 12 seconds, and it actually does look as if it's stretched out again once again. The main group is at 27 seconds, so it really is. I think now, Phil, we are starting to look at the top 6 riders, but which way round is it going to work?
And it's not been easy. Every one of these riders, should they survive to the finish, are class bike riders purely for this reason. They've had the strength to hold off a peloton which is literally just over their shoulders. And look at the drive now, because I think Fletcher is beginning to think at 6 kilometres to go, if this doesn't work, then we get nothing, because they are fully committed now, and we've just dropped down to 5 kilometres to go.
I've got to say that looking at these riders now, they seem to be riding just that little bit slower than the two leaders. Tom Boonen looks across. He wants to see whether or not Baden Cook's going to come forward and do a turn. I think Cookie is right on the edge of his saddle here. He's starting to miss a few turns. I don't think he's playing around, you know. I think every one of these riders, Phil, right now is absolutely and utterly on the ribbit.
Well, the rainbow bands on shorts and sleeves for Tom Boonen, the man who won 23 races last year, and he's come out fighting again this year. And it's now Fletcher. I thought Fletcher was in a little bit of trouble earlier, but he seems to be the stronger of the two right now. Out goes the leg of Stuart O'Grady. That's the track craft for you as he gets under that 5 kilometres to go, so we're slightly out of sync with the GPS system and the banners, but nonetheless they are now just on 3 miles from the finish, and that was about 3 seconds, I think, for this group to come around the corner. It was never 14.
It was not 14 seconds at all. I thought they were starting to sneak away with a slight advantage there. This is the group that's chasing. It's quite a large group, but I'm trying to see on the front who is doing the majority of the pacemaking. It is Francis Desjeux trying to pull it back together, but look at the line there behind them. All of the lime green shorts of Team Unibet, they're trying to slow down the chase because they reckon their man Cookie has got the best chance of doing a good ride. The GPS, Phil, is telling us that the gap is going out to 15 seconds, but I have a hard time actually believing that.
Well, we're slowly but surely approaching the 4 kilometres to go banner, and Fletcher is now doing most of the work here, and O'Grady, I think, is finding the jet lag from California just beginning to kick in. Well, around the top of that corner, and so it's probably around about 12 seconds. It might well be right just now.
It could be. There's the corner that the chasing group of 4 riders are just about to negotiate, and they're going to start to see those banners come up now nice and quickly. These two riders are, I think, going to have to battle it out over the last 400 or 500 metres, but they've still got to keep the pressure on right up until the last moment. O'Grady looks very good on his saddle. He rode very well, I reckon, in the Amgen Tour of California. As we come back to the... Every time we get a long straight look, Phil, it seems to me at 4 kilometres to go as if these guys are closing the gap. But then when we go to the helicopter, it looks to me as if they're just about to survive. Now is the chasing group, and they're not far behind either.
They're not far behind the 4, and Cookie took a look over his shoulder there. He's seen the peloton right here, and I think that Baden Cook is now really suffering in that chase group. I think he's going to have to hope he can hang on and use his sprint for the finish, and he's going to keep an eye on the chasers coming up from the bunch. These two riders, every time our camera cuts here, it does look as though O'Grady is feeling the pace. He's going through now, though. We've not yet gone under, to my knowledge, the 3 kilometre banner, so I think our GPS is approximately half a kilometre out here. So we're still heading for 3 kilometres for the two leaders. The 4 chasers looking up the road, they can see them. That, I suspect, is about 10 or 13 seconds for sure.
These are the achtervolgers, the following group, the second group on the road of 4 riders. Boonen looking a little bit nervous now, wondering whether or not now... In fact, you were talking about O'Grady being tired. I've got to tell you, Phil, I think that Juan Antonio Fletcher now... I think everybody's tired at this point. Everybody is just trying to survive. These guys will try and get and hold that 14 or 15 seconds advantage up to the final kilometre, and only then will they start to try and figure out how they're going to win this race, because they have to survive and stay away from this group of 4.
Well, this is a great bike race to open the season in Belgium. There's no doubt about that. This has been a most aggressive race. Even when we had the breakaway away for so long, the peloton were always active, always chasing. Once they were caught came the attacks, and now we're seeing 2 riders taking a very early gamble, really. O'Grady went very early on, I think because he sensed the peloton that were in difficulty, that everybody was giving their best effort, and it was time to go and see who was the strongest of them all. There's the 2 leaders. These are the 4 chasers. Cook, I think, has stopped working here. Pizarro also looking over his shoulder. They don't like it when team cars go by.
Well, they don't, but I tell you what, the 2 riders in front will be happy to see the team car. That's the neutral service car moving forward to get in behind Stuart O'Grady and Juan Antonio Fletcher. At 2 kilometres or 2.5 kilometres to go, Phil, I have to say I think they've got it now. I think they've got it locked in, and they will decide the victory between Fletcher and Stuart O'Grady, and there they are.
Well, last year's winner, we just saw him there, Philippe Gilbert. I think at 2 kilometres he's feeling he's not going to get up now. He's not going to defend back-to-back in Het Volk, and he made some good moves today. Unlucky as he was to have that minor tumble, but I think it altered the course of the race to some degree. But now we've got 2 riders clear, and they'll shortly be in the final mile of Het Volk. These are the 4 chasers. It'll be difficult now for anybody to reach them. Why should we change the habit of the last 10 kilometres? And Stuart Stuart O'Grady and Fletcher very shortly are going to start thinking about how they're going to win this race for themselves.
Well, we come up to what a lot of riders will probably think the last climb of the day. It's actually a freeway bridge over the E17 which links Ghent and Antwerp, and you can see now Fletcher pushing it on this little false flat. It must really hurt. Once they go over the top of this false flat, this little climb here, they will then in the distance, Phil, see the kilometre flag, and then I think was the only time they'll start to think about which one of them is going to duke out the stage. Fletcher looks across now to see whether or not he's going to get some more help from Stuart O'Grady, and Cookie, I think he's lost it.
Yep.
Cookie's been dropped.
Yeah, Cookie's unhitched here, and 3 riders going clear. It's Tom Bonan, who's been setting the pace too, and Noyens, a former winner of this event, in third wheel. There are the 2 leaders up in the distance with the team car. It's beginning to look like a mountain up there now, but it's a straight run now down into the finishing line, and we should see the 1 kilometre banner. There it is, up the road now. Look at Fletcher bury himself here now, because this could be a great result for the Spanish rider, but I think Stuart O'Grady, having had so many high places this last couple of seasons, is now nervous. He wants the win, and only the win will do. He's not working so hard.
Not a good sign there, Phil. They've actually pulled out the neutral service vehicle as we go inside the final kilometre now for these 3 who are still chasing the 2 in front. Neither of these riders, by the way, have won a race for an awful long time. I think we have to go back to 2005 to the last time Fletcher had a win, and maybe 2004 for the last time Stuart O'Grady got a win on the road.
You're absolutely right. No, actually what has gone unnoticed, Stuart O'Grady won a race this year right out in January. It was the Tour of South, it was the Championship of South Australia.
Yeah.
A lot of people won't count that as a win, and we've got a move here that's going on.
Well, that's Noyens.
Noyens has gone to cross the gap.
He's halfway across.
Yeah, it's all the teammates of Tom Bonan are now attacking him here. You know, this gap, we're in the last kilometre here, and Fletcher is wanting more effort from O'Grady because he wants second wheel, and Noyens is about to reach them. This could be a result on the line for Noyens, who won the race in 2005.
Well, this is it. Pozzato's come back to him as well, and Tom Bonan's going now.
What a mess they made of that. Fletcher refused to lead, O'Grady refused to help. The result is that Filippo Pozzato has come over the top of them, and he's now going for gold. And this could be a big victory for the Italian. Fletcher, who clearly has had the legs, is trying to come back at him. Filippo Pozzato is going to win at Flèche-Wallonne in the very last 300 metres. Fletcher will get second, and Tom Bonan third, and Stuart O'Grady is the last of the group.
Well, Phil, in the excitement there, I think you said he was going to win Flèche-Wallonne. I think you meant Het Volk, but don't worry about it, because that was an incredible turnaround. There's Baden Cook just coming into the line. He's going to cross the line in 6th place, but that was an incredible mistake, I think, by Stuart O'Grady and Juan Antonio Fletcher. They must have kept going. They should have kept going right the way down to the line. Here is the rest of the main field.
And Cookie gets 6. He survived, but here's the sprint. Same country, wrong race. But this is the finish of Het Volk, as again a quick step rider comes clear of the field here. But it looks as though it's Garden who pips them on the line, so the Unibet boys get 6th and 7th as they come over the line. It was a great race, Paul. They never eased up. I feel that O'Grady and Fletcher, they made a big mistake in that last 500 metres. They probably didn't realise how close that chase was coming.
Well, as we look down at the rest of the riders starting to come in, this was the move here. Pippo Pozzato, just exactly the same way as I suppose almost 12 months ago, Phil. He won himself Milan-San Remo, jumped out of the pack in the last couple of kilometres. They really made a mess of that, and I wonder, you can see if Fletcher still managed to hold on for second place. He was maybe playing a clever little game with Stuart O'Grady and trying to hold something back, and he's just paid the highest price possible for it.
Oh, he's very upset about that, that's for sure. Pozzato, quite rightly, very happy. 2 wins for him last year. He's already got 2 wins now, and we're only just into the start of March, because he won the Tour de Haute-Var last month as well. Well taken indeed, and as I said, the rumour at the start he hadn't even started, but he forgot to sign on. I think he won't mind paying the few Swiss francs fine for that today. He's an interesting character, but at the end of the day, he's also an ex-teammate of Tom Bonan, and he got the better of him today.
He certainly did, and let's just look how he did it. This was a very impressive move. You see as Nick Noyens moves across there, all of a sudden Pozzato goes down the right-hand side. Bonan hasn't got it at all here. He's really on the rivet, sitting onto the wheel of Nick Noyens, and O'Grady at this point, he just gives up and says, what have I done wrong? I've just lost a great big win in Het Volk. And Fletcher has still got a fair amount of pressure there, but he's never going to get anywhere near Pippo Pozzato. And just look at that crowd.
A terrific crowd, and look at the determination too of Tom Bonan. He never knows when to give up. He stuck it out all the way to the finish. He gets third place ahead of the 2005 winner Noyens. There's the happy face of Filippo Pozzato, a pretty popular guy, and in fact he does speak reasonable English as well. He's just over 25 years of age now. He's got 28 victories to his credit. This without doubt after 2 sixth places in Het Volk. He's now landed the big one, but you know, 400 metres to go today, there's no way he thought he was going to win, but just take a look at this.
But look at that speed. He's got the speed, he got the jump, and it was that acceleration that really put Tom Bonan into a little bit of difficulty. And once he got to this point, there was no looking back, there was no coming back. He certainly hit them hard just at the right time, and that I was going to say is his best win so far this season. And I think we're going to see him ride exceptionally well once we go up to the big classics in the month of April.
Well, apart from his victory in Milan San Remo back the March of last year, and that's coming up, and he's going to go in as favourite for that now after this win, I would say this is probably his best win apart from Milan San Remo. He's had a stage win too in the Tour de France, and he's now going to enjoy the moment as he gets ready. Leaky Gas slightly redesigned their jerseys this year, and he's delivered a big win for them. They've made a good start this year. Well, we look out along the rather drab countryside of Belgium, but this is the hotbed of world cycling at any time of the year, and it's a great place to be a professional bike rider in. And here they are, Filippo Pozzato getting the win today, and his finishing time, by the way, was 5 hours and 4 minutes. Juan Antonio Fletcher was in second place at 2 seconds, Tom Bonan third, and Nick Noyens, Stuart O'Grady, Baden Cook coming in at 30 seconds in the end, and Gorick Garden bringing home the race in 7th place. Robbie Mchugh there still flexed his muscles, finishing well up in the bunch sprint, taking 9th on the day. And the top 10 completed there by Stephen de Jong, the rider who was riding pretty well in defence of Bonan earlier on. So those are the results. There is another huge trophy for the winner to lift today. I hope he's got the strength left as the 3 riders step onto the makeshift podium here in Lokeren. And Filippo Pozzato will take centre stage as the Italian winner today. And all smiles in the end for Juan Antonio Fletcher, though he's pretty unhappy when he got beaten into second place when it looked like he was going to win this race. And Tom Bonan, ever popular, he waves to the crowd as well. They're the top 3 finishes in the first Belgian semi-classic of the year. Hope you've enjoyed the coverage. This was a great race. There's a lot more to come on World Cycling Productions this year. For Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying, until the next one, goodbye for now.